Well, Tim, we're here in Philadelphia, and I have a rare opportunity, and it's a privilege to be able to meet Father Jim Drukker, who has a really interesting background. And the reason that I'm talking to him today is because we have a lot in common, and one of which is that he was a chaplain for the guys in multiple wars. It was Vietnam, and then you went to the East and so forth and so on. So you've touched a lot of guys like me. In other words, you've worked with them, but you weren't always a priest. You didn't always just all of a sudden wake up and say, I want to be in the clergy and be a chaplain. Take us back to when you were like in high school. What were you up to?
First of all, I'm proud to say that I'm a Philadelphian. I'm from the toughest section of Philadelphia. And Jerry mentioned earlier when we were talking off camera about I was asked to give a prayer on the house floor of the Harrisburg some years ago for Richie Grisella, who was retiring. And I come from the toughest section of Philadelphia, K and A, Kensington, Allegheny. It still is pretty tough, if not tougher. And I remember I got up and I write my prayers. I could call you John, I'm sure, Brother Veteran.
Oh, of course.
And I never take from a book. I mean, I do occasionally, but normally something real important, I will write the prayer. And I wrote this very nice prayer. And I don't say that boasting, I just say it's just me. It's my motif, my talent, I guess, and also the skills God has given me. And I got up and I said, before I begin our prayer here in this awesome chamber of so many wonderful men and women who have served back to the beginning history of our nation, but I said, I'm from Philly, and I said, I'm from Kensington and Allegheny, K&A, where the men are men and the women are men. And all the Philly reps, of course, they all broke up, and everybody else didn't know what the heck I was talking about. But a tough section of Philadelphia, and that's where we say coffee half and half, because I was a broadcaster anyway.
So high school, what was your interest when you were in high school?
I went through, I think I shared with you earlier, I went through Catholic school for a short period of time, a couple of years. First Holy Communion, St. Anne's Church, Lehigh Avenue, Philadelphia, North Philly, Kensington, Fishtown, Bridgeport, Richmond. But then I had a little episode with a nun, and my mother, because my father died when I was 2 months old, John.
Oh, gosh,
so my mom
okay.
raised me and my brother.
Did she ever remarry when you were a kid?
She did, yeah, believe it or not.
So you had a stepdad?
I did for a short period, and he was Army. He was a cook. He was an E5, I think, a buck sergeant. Matter of fact, I never realized how much military my family, not just I, but my family is, until one day I was actually sat down, pondered it, and I remember my oldest brother, Joseph Edward Drukker. He was a tech sergeant, Togolier, U.S. Army Air Corps, which became U.S. Army Air Force, USAAF, then became what I became part of, U.S. Air Force. He was 25. I was 1 year old when he left, and at 45 he did die. He died and is buried in England at Cambridge Cemetery. Technically, for those of the know and military personnel, he's buried at Mattingley Cemetery, and they call it Cambridge because that's the biggest town near there in England. And I was the only one in our whole family, praise God. By the way, it was my brother Joseph, then it was my brother Paul. He was Navy, U.S. Navy, submariner, Second World War, and one of his subs was blown up. And I understood as I was growing up and spending time with him in Groton, New London, Connecticut, where he became an executive of Electric Boat, a lot of men would come to him, brother sailors, and I never realized it as a child, but I began to realize as I got older that he was probably a hero himself, having saved some men from one sub that was blown up. He was on the Corsair and the Trutta, whatever. And ironically, years later in the 60s, I was Army then, but I was working in an electric boat company, and I didn't build them alone, but I worked on two subs only known by numbers, 638 and 49. One became the USS Sunfish, and the other became the USS Whale. So I helped build two nuclear submarines. But then my brother Joe, and then my brother Louis, my baby brother, who was born, my mother married, I think it was a year after my father died, and he was born, of course, a year later, give or take, properly, especially
Sure,
in those
sure.
days, Lewis, and he was Army Security Agency, Diddy Popper. And then there's me, and then I have uncles and aunts, so really probably a very beautiful family history of many military members of different branches.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
yeah.
So back to high school.
Yeah.
What were your interests as a high school guy?
Well, in high school, I always wanted to be Frankie Avalon or Bobby Rydell, and ironically, Bobby and I are good friends now. We have dinner once a month. I'm the only honorary Goomba, Slovak Goomba. I call it the Goomba Gang. And we would sing doo-wops. The high school I went from St. Anne's Elementary, then I went to Hackett School, John Paul Jones Junior High School. We pledge our loyalty, justice, order, and neatness. Our honor code will be with efficiency and service. Forget about it. That's why I never sang with major groups. And then we would sing doo-wops, and then I went to Thomas Edison High School, which was the old Northeast High. And this, I can't believe I'm this old, 77, God help us. This would have been 57. I went to Edison, 8th and Lee High. They had just built a new Northeast. This is 50 years ago. So they changed that to Thomas Alva Edison, and that's where I went for 3 years. And I actually realized again years later that some people, I used to be a theatrical booking agent, Jolly Joyce Agency, Philly, New York, and Germany, that one of the background singers, who now is one of the lead singers of the Times, as we stroll along together, wee-oo. Anyway, Caesar, one day we're talking, because I was hanging with Jerry Tempesta. I started managing them, kind of, to book them at different places. Our man that we pray should be and should receive the Medal of Honor for his heroic actions. And Caesar was one of the singers. And here we're talking one day, and he said he graduated, and I said, I went there. You're kidding me. So as you hear Kenny Vance, the great singer, with Jane the Americans, to some of the great doo-wop singers, we would sing doo-wop in the bathroom, sing harmony in Edison High School.
What did you do after graduation?
Oh God, let me see. I guess I worked in restaurants. I always say anybody worth their salt had to be a pot washer, dishwasher, sandwich boy, Philadelphia.
Salad guy.
You got it. And busboy especially.
Sure.
Especially pot washer. Oh, that was a lot of fun, let me tell you. And but I worked to help my mom, because even my mom had remarried, there were some problems, and they weren't together, so we didn't have much money. I remember.
And there were kids there. You had a pretty good-sized family there.
Yes, altogether, yes. And I remember one time, John, and this is going to bring back memories. I remember getting margarine that was white, and he had to break the capsule for the red dye to go in to stir it up, so you had.
It looked like.
So you had margarine. Yeah.
You know what my mom used to tell me about that. I personally didn't experience it, but she said during the war and stuff, that was it.
So you're calling me old, John?
No.
Not having experienced it.
You're not that much older than me, but my mother had me very young. So, I mean, there's probably not that much disparity.
Lying to a priest, John?
So, okay, so you're working these restaurant jobs.
Right.
And then did you have any, at that point in your life, did you have anything forward thinking, I want to do this, or I want to go for this, or anything like that?
I can say this. I was never an altar boy. It might be you sharing with me that you were an altar boy at one time in your life, which is strange. How many priests, probably 90% of them, say, yeah, I was an altar boy.
Sure.
Never an altar boy, but I did love God. And I remember as a young child saying to God, I like to serve people. I like to help people. And it really is me. I really love people to a fault. I'm famous, and I say this boasting, and I say not in a boasting way, but in a caring way. Tony Battalla, the Letterman's a good friend of mine. Bobby's a good friend. Jerry, the Emeralds, Frankie and the Fashions. There's a lot of famous artists I used to book as a theatrical booking agent. as a songwriter. I had hit records back in the 70s. But anyway, I'm starting to go off a little bit on a tangent here. But
And that's okay, I'll bring you back.
that's good. I welcome it.
What hit records did you have?
In 1970, I was a disc jockey on the mighty 590 WRM, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton's #1 station for fun of the Jim Drukker, Father Jim Drukker Night Flight show. Did the all-night show, and I used to.
Why are you laughing?
Because everybody knew me in the business. Because prior to being a DJ, I was a record promotion man here in Philadelphia. We're in Philly, of course, here, and we're in Chester technically, but on the outskirts of Philly. And I would promote records. Patty LaBelle and the Bluebells. I was their road manager in 1961.
Patty LaBelle.
And the Bluebells, yes. Then they had I Sold My Heart to the Junkman, Newtown Records, and the owner of the label was a fellow named Harold B. Robinson, 6600 North Broad Street. How's that for memory?
Wow.
And he had the Harold B. Robinson, I'm not sure if it was Chrysler or Plymouth or whatever, big dealership. And down in the basement, this is really archival stuff, libs, that's an 11, lib situation stuff. We say that in theology, hermeneutically, biblical theology. Down in the basement was Bobby Martin, one of the first African-American black producers in Philadelphia. And they cut I Sold My Heart to the Junkman, Down the Aisle, and then, of course, eventually she went on to fame, bigger fame as a single singer artist. And Cindy went on with the Diana Ross and the Supremes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she left Philly here to go on and become
Did
one
you
of,
ever have any dealings with Diana?
Never with her, no.
Okay.
No.
How about that group she was with? Wasn't she with Quincy and some of those?
Yeah.
Or, am I right on that, or is it?
Supremes or?
What? Yeah, when she was doing the Supremes, wasn't there? Who was her producer in those days?
Well, Barry Gordy.
Oh, that's
Gordy,
the one I
yeah,
was
Barry
thinking
Gordy,
of. Yeah. Did you ever run into him?
No, never ran into. That was more Detroit. In the music industry, there was New York music, there was Philly music, and of course, the fame of Philly. And I said earlier, no offense to Bobby or Frankie or Fabian or any of our great stars of Philadelphia, Chubby Checker, probably if Dick Clark had not exposed or had them on his show, American Bandstand, which went from TV Bandstand, Channel 6, WPTZ, FIL, it then became American Bandstand out on the West Coast. So all of these artists, they would not have had the fame, I don't think.
Oh, the exposure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, so you had, New York had a certain flavor to it. And the reason I know that, because I would record, as I said earlier, being a promo man and then getting into radio, I would meet different groups, and all these producers of different labels, Laurie Records, Elliot Greenberg and the Schwartz brothers, Dion DiMucci, obviously, et cetera, they would say, Jim, if you have a group, bring them in, and you can cut them here at our studios free. And if we release the record, we'll work at a production deal. And if not, you own the 2-inch master. I'm talking 2-inch masters. So I must have 15 of them. And I recorded quite a few groups mostly from Scranton, Wilkes-Barre from here. And then there was Luciano Carl, C-A-R-L-E, he was the head man of pure Southern music. And we'd go there to record it in their studios. And there was a young man who was a gopher in the industry. I'm sure would be the same thing in the military. Sure. Go for this, go for that. You're an E1, E2, whatever. So his name was Jimmy Einer, E-I-N-N-E-R. He later would go on to fame while I was overseas serving in southern Turkey, northern Iraq, First Persian Gulf. He became famous with the Raspberries, I think, some berries. I think it was the Raspberries. He became their sole producer, manager, agent, the whole thing. So then I had a group signed with RCA Records, but my hit was a song called Timothy. And I had the flip side, technically, Drukker Publishing, BMI, Broadcast Music Incorporated. But whatever hits, it's a hit. And it was about cannibalism.
Wow.
Yes, and the fellow that wrote the A-side, Timothy, was a fellow named Rupert Holmes. Mm-hmm. His real name is Julian, but his real name is Julian Gill.
That's the Pina Colada song.
That's absolutely.
Yes.
Pina Colada, and they had him, who's it going to, and he wrote Timothy. And that sold pretty close to 1 million. It was number 13 in the world in Cashbox magazine, Billboard, Record World, Mickey's Turntable, they were all the big the industry papers and music the gazettes and that stuff back from the 60s, 50s, and 60s primarily, and into the 70s. Matter of fact, we have a man here, and we have a group called the Broadcast Pioneers of Philadelphia, and I proudly boast being part of that. Wonderful organization of great broadcasters of Philly. And Danny, the juniors belong to it. And there's some of the greats here from Philly. If you're not from Philly, you wouldn't know, but WIBG. WIBG! Joe Niagara, High Late, High Ski Rudy McFatty Suit. Jerry Blavitz from Philadelphia, the great disc jockey. And he's still kicking and doing great at 70-some years. As a matter of fact, he's my age, I think, 77.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a real cooker and a great, good fellow and a great disc jockey.
And those were in the days
he calls himself an entertainer, excuse me.
Those were in the days when disc jockeys really had a lot of work to do. I mean,
We played the records.
I mean, and the commercials and all, nothing automated, was there? I mean, there was no computers or...
None whatsoever.
Yeah.
Everything was by the turntables, we had cassettes, you put the cassettes in for commercials or the jingles, we called them Jim Drucker's show or the John so-and-so show or Tim show, whatever. Yeah, it was great stuff.
Did you ever meet Wolfman Jack? We talked about him. Did you ever get to talk
Never
to
met
him?
Wolfman. There's probably, having been in the industry and knowing many, many people, he's probably one of the few I would have really liked to have met. Like, as far as singers, Perry Como would have been someone I would have loved to have met. Not only because he's a great singer, but he was also a wonderful man. And I was told not to see any other faith is not wonderful, but I was told he was a devout Catholic. Perry
Interesting.
Como from Canonsburg, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take you back to high school.
Yes, sir.
I said what you were looking for in the future.
Right.
Where does this connect to the disc jockey or the music? I mean, is there anything significant between graduation and when you got into music?
You mean with radio and music?
Or anything?
Yeah, well-
What was going on in your life that you were
I know.
doing?
I think what it was, I started working for Jolly Joyce Agency. We were booking great acts, mostly lounge acts.
You were a young guy.
18, 19. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. And then I went from Jolly Joyce. I started cutting records at Sound Plus Studios, which is completely out of business now, on Frankfurt Avenue. And then Reco Art, which would become one of the studios where all the famed Philly artists would record at. Avalon,
Oh, yes.
Fabian, Rydell.
Where did Paul Anka fit into all this?
He's a Canadian boy.
So how did they fit into these other, you had your New Yorkers, your Phillies, your...
He would probably, I don't know, it's an interesting perspective. I would say he was probably New York type.
Okay, and did he get in with Dick Clark?
Oh, absolutely.
So that's
sure.
how, probably, and then...
Another one, sure.
Yeah.
Not only did in-towners, Philadelphians, become successful, obviously those who came in from out of Freddie Cannon,
Yes.
Bobby Vinton, name it. They would come in and once the record, I remember they had Make It or Break It or whatever it was, and the standing joke amongst musicians and singers and entertainers is, well, Dick, I like the song, music's good, got a good beat, like the lyrics, but I don't like the words, so I'll give it, they don't know words or lyrics, so I'll give it a 90. At 90, they just berated it. They give it a 90. So, and if it became a hit there, that's it.
Yeah.
It was selling me records. And there's this WABC in New York. A good friend of mine was the morning disc jockey Herb Oscar Anderson, HOA. He would sing. He just passed away. God rest his soul. And there I go again. Bring me back. I'm slipping. I don't know why. It's just starting to happen.
Okay.
I'm getting very upset
I guess I'm
at
just
myself.
trying to flow here a little bit.
Yeah.
High school, it sounds to me like you did some restaurant work, but then you got involved in music.
Yeah.
Somehow
I love music.
at 18.
And I play guitar. Some of the sessions I actually played on our roulette session with the Lydells. They had a hit record back in early 60, 59, 60. I wasn't part of that hit, but I became part of a roster of singers out here in near the airport. What's her name? Inez Ryan, and her name was Edith Browder, and she had different groups, and the Lydells, and they backed me up with some of my songs. I had a song called The Day Rock and Roll Dies. The day that rock and roll will die, all teenagers then will cry for anyone that has ever crooned a solid rock and roll tune. And what about Ricky, Fats Domino too? No more King Elvis, we'll croon for you. But never became a hit.
So did they have studio musicians
Yes,
back
absolutely,
in the day?
sure.
And so a singer that didn't have a band, obviously, to record would have to find someone like you that
As a producer, sure.
that could
Yeah.
connect the music side to the vocal. And
That's what a producer does, or an
okay.
A&R man.
And so how long did you do that?
I did it with some success, but then without getting into any negative, which there are some in any industry, there were people that would not be so decent and take things and say it was theirs. So
Oh, yeah,
I'm
yep.
trying to be decent about it.
Milton Berle,
And that happened.
Milton Berle made a living off of that.
Oh, okay.
He never, what was it? He used to have a saying about, because he took everybody out, he would borrow other people's stuff. They weren't famous, but when he did it, he was,
Oh, okay.
he was famous.
Okay. I know we say makeup, that I remember. Remember? They come out and display him with a big bag of makeup on his face or something. He was a funny comedian.
So, okay, so you're doing music and you're 18, 19. What are you doing when you're like early 20s?
Oh God, I think that I was just in restaurant work. I did my some Army stint.
Well, let's just talk very briefly about that. Did you join, or were you?
No,
what
it was
year
mostly
was this?
reserve and guard on that. That was mostly reserve and guard.
Oh, okay. What years was that?
64 to 70.
Okay, so by the way, just as a note, our lieutenant that came in after we'd been decimated at
You mean in Vietnam?
in Nam in
Yes, sir.
in '69,
Right.
we had been decimated up on the Cambodian border. The lieutenant that replaced ours was a National Guard
Wow.
lieutenant, and we just never saw National Guard folks,
Yes.
right?
NG.
Because in the day,
It was US, AR, and NG.
and the NGs never anticipated ever. They were just supposed to be doing weekends and the routine.
Of course.
But of course that's all.
Well, I do know. I can tell you this, John. I was at Jackson, 1964, and I spent 2 months basic, M1, M16, M60, hand grenade, the whole thing. Basic military infantry training.
So you were 11 Bravo.
I was in 11 Bravo, sir. Yes, sir. And then I spent 2 months right away. I went home for a week, whatever the usual is out of
Yep.
Jackson. Went back to Jackson, spent 2 more months in advanced infantry training
Okay.
and simulated for combat for Vietnam. And then I spent, I'm kind of not proud saying that because everybody's been in Nam and I know what you suffered, although I had some other experiences later. So, but it's what my life is and it's the truth. And then I stayed there and spent 2 more months in basic unit training, BUT. Then I just went into different units.
Okay.
And I didn't go into NAM.
Were you guys at that point? Did you even anticipate going to Nam?
Oh yeah, I can tell you right now, there was talk that we were going.
Yeah.
That there was, I remember vividly. I was frightened, worried, because I was getting the full 6 months of and my understanding is years later, and that I have some other experiences in my military career, that there were some that just went over after 2 months, they went right over. So here I'm being trained more extensively in a way.
Wow.
With the M60 rocket launcher, remember 3.5?
Of
How's
course,
that remembered?
of
3.5. Fantastic weapon, man. That killed that tank.
Yeah, the
I'll
Laws
tell you,
rocket.
Right in there.
The shoulder-fired
Yes,
Laws.
sir. Yeah,
Yep.
3.5 rocket launcher. But then, so I'm going off a tad bit here. Yeah, so, yeah, and then, I got to bring me back a little. I'm sorry, I feel terrible with this,
Why?
especially on camera, that I'm going off a little bit here.
No.
It's very unusual
So-
for me.
So
that
you're an NG.
Yes, sir.
Are
Yeah.
you doing, is that weekend stuff?
Yes, yes, sir.
What are you
Yeah.
doing outside of the National
Oh, that's
Guard?
when I was doing, I guess I was, yeah, I went up to electric boat. My brother Paul Drukker, the Navy man that saved some people's lives on one
Yep. of
of the subs blowing up, the
Yep.
Corsair or the Trotter, he invited me to come to Quincy, not Quincy, but Quincy, Massachusetts, to get a job in the office for electric boat jet dynamics. This is just after my training.
Mm-hmm.
So I went there, and then I was in the Guard. Okay, I remember Waltham, Massachusetts. I was in the unit there, and I was doing my duty properly. And by
What,
the way,
what rank were you at this point?
E3, I think.
So you were just
yes, sir.
a grunt.
Yeah, I was a grunt. Yes,
Okay.
sir. Matter of fact, I remember one good thing. It baffles me today, with all the industries, even the technologized like Norton, Grumman, all these Boeing, et cetera. And not necessarily Boeing, but Electric Boat, et cetera. General Dynamics. In the day, when I went away from my 2-week drill, they not only allowed me to keep the money for the drill, whatever it was, it was $78 or whatever it was,
sure.
but they actually paid me. They actually paid me.
While
It
you were
wasn't
gone.
in contract.
While you were gone.
Absolutely. They honored and respected
Wow.
that I was military and that they kept my position. Even if I had gone active duty and had gone to NAM,
Wow.
they were going to take care of
That's
me.
phenomenal.
But then I worked there building these 2 subs, 638. Again, not alone. I was an electrician. I ran cable in the torpedo room. When I think about it, I don't know how in God's earth I ever went down those holes. I mean, it's a submarine. Look at me today, my
Well,
God.
you weren't like this in the.
Well, I shouldn't say look at me today that I'm that bad, but I certainly don't think I'd go down that hole. But I would go down happily, and I was a deck leader. I worked my way up to deck leader, reading the SAMs,
Oh, yeah.
schematics. Then I have a cute story. I was there 1 or 2 weeks, and my deck leader, John Hayes, I hope this is not boring to the audience, but he said, Jimmy, come here. He said, I want you to take these SAMs. He said, take it over. There's a little Chinaman over in building 5A. And it was a gigantic shipyard. It was formerly the Beth Steel shipyard, and now owned by General Dynamics Electric Boat Division. And he said, when you go over there, these are wrinkled pretty bad, Jimmy. So what you got to do, you got to take them over there, and they're going to iron them out. Okay, yes, sir, Mr. Hayes. So I struggled over, walk over, half a mile down the road, wherever the building was. I go in, and I says, "Is this I'm forgetting what they're calling us, because Sam's, I know the nickname, I can't get the real name, when you read the prints of that, you know."
Mm-hmm.
So he said, I said, I'd like to have these pressed. He said, what? What do you like? Well, Mr. Hayes, John Hayes? Yeah. I said, he told me that I have to get these pressed. I'm just here a week. Well, I'm sorry about the profundity of that, but I went back with my head between my legs, and somebody was hilariously laughing at me. And did you
man.
get them ironed?
Were
I said,
you-
no. He told me. No, actually, when I got back, they said no. I told them. I said they told me to come back in an hour because the Chinaman's not there yet. So I should have learned from M60, M1, M16. You
Sure,
kidding me?
Sure.
M60 machine gun?
Sure.
I'm letting these people fool around with the kid?
Well, as you probably know, whenever we'd get a new kid in the unit, there was a certain baptism by fire.
That's
and
it.
And it was
That was
usually a prank, a good one. And that's what they did to you. They set you up, obviously. And while you were very serious, very dedicated to the task, you were going to complete your mission. They were back there just laughing their rear ends off.
And then I started to go to school at night because I said, I want to do better for myself. And all the guys, we called ourselves shipyard bums, cute, and we used to get drunk I shouldn't say this, on Friday. Everybody would go to the Washington Tap, and the older fellas that were married like for 100 years, they would go in and have a shot in a beer, a Boilermaker, down that sucker,
yes.
go home and give the check to their wife. I was a single young fella, of course. But the wonderful experience. But while I was there, I went to Emerson College, one of the finest colleges for broadcasting, speech therapy. Mr. Matson was there. Henry Winkler, the Fonz, right?
Fonzie.
Yeah, he was my classmate. But I was in evening school. He was day school. And there was a fellow named Vinny DeBona. Never forgot about him, because one day I'm watching the funniest movies for children on
Home
TV.
videos? Funniest home videos?
Yeah. He was the producer. He
Oh, my
became very
God.
famous with that. And that Tom Berenger worked for him. And then...
Sniper.
Okay. Yes.
I know
That's
exactly
right.
who you're talking
And then,
about.
and then he later would produce MacGyver. That was his show. So he did quite well in it. I've been trying to track him down for
I have to throw
years.
this name out at you, Billy Jack.
Oh, sure. My God, he was great. What a great show that was. That he had two. It wasn't a 2 or 3. I think it was soliloquy.
yes,
I think there were 3
yes.
of them. Great, and the music. Oh, the soundtrack on it was phenomenal. as well.
Phenomenal.
Now didn't he go on to become an actor with one of the soap operas? I think.
Yeah,
Tom something.
I think so. Tom
Can't grab his name.
Laughlin?
That's it. Yeah. I think that's it.
Where did
yeah.
I come up with that?
Yeah, you got it.
What kind of money did you make in the shipyards?
I did good. Yeah. All I know is I get a lot of overtime, and I actually built, and a cute story to lead up to this. It reminded me about NATO. Just bring that back. I built the hydrophones.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure.
I sat in the again, how on God's earth I got through the hatch or whatever you call it. It was just an opening then, and I went in there. There was no bulkhead, nothing. It was just pure steel, and we're building. And I ran all the cables, and I was building these hydrophones. All it was molds. And I sat there reading the newspaper or books or whatever, and I got paid a lot of money, double and triple time, because it was weekends.
Oh, yeah.
And so the 2 ships I made and completed the building, if you want to call it, or forming or making, the hydrophones on the 638 and the 649, which became the USS Whale and the USS Sunfish. Now, flash ahead years later, Persian Gulf had not started yet, but it was happening. It was on the way. I'm in Turkey, Angel Lake Air Base. Had 2 weeks off, and I fly into Sigonella to meet a priest friend of mine, Father Ed McMahon, commander, lieutenant colonel for us, Army,
Sure.
Marines. And so I go to spend
No
some...
relation to Ed McMahon of...
None whatsoever. And so we flew in. I flew into Sigonella. A young man comes to me. I'm in my uniform, captain bars, my cross, etc. And he said, "Are you a priest or a minister?" I said, "I'm a priest." Oh, he said, "Wonderful." He said, "Father, what do you need?" I said, "Well, I'm flying over to Sardinia, and I'm going to meet a priest friend of mine. He's stationed at La Maddalena, a little tiny, beautiful island. God, it was magnificent. I spent 2 week there. It was beautiful." He said, "Well, look, hang here," because he said, there's somebody coming here, and I'm going to set you up. So I got to fly from there with a 1-star who turned out to be a Catholic boy. And I hate to keep saying this like I'm only deference to Catholics. I love everybody.
I
but it just
understand.
happened, and we're just beating the band, talking about
Yeah,
theology.
there were a few Protestants and Jews over there, too.
Yes, there were. Yeah, matter of fact, quite a few of them. And then we picked up a 3-star, and that's when I knew something was happening. Something happening in Denmark or whatever the old
Yes.
saying is, because they were talking about things. And by that time, I had shut my mouth,
Something's rotten
knowing
in
I'm only a
Denmark.
captain. That's it. And there's a couple of admirals, and even the Catholic 1-star said, "Father, we're going to have some military talk here, whatever." So I said, "Fine." And he got talking about this is going to happen, and so there were things happening. Without specifics, I knew something was on the horizon. Interesting, very serious stuff. But when I got there with Father Red, I spent 2 weeks. 1 week, and you got the island here, of course it should be the other way for the camera, the island over here of Italy, over here Sardinia, and up over here is a little tiny island named after Mary Magdalene, La Maddalena. And would you believe the women swam half naked? Hey, God help me. Yes, Father. What was that, Father Ed? No, I'm sorry. Yeah, what was that, Father? And the little bambino on the ocean there, in La Maddalena, they all around in their natural. It was gorgeous, so beautiful, so pure, so nice. And then we flew over to Rome, and I spent a week there. When we went back there,
Did you get an audience with the pontiff?
No, but I did know on my own merit, more than the Jesuit Father Ed McMahon, that there was a priest there, Archbishop. Let me see, my son. J. Van Leerdy. I'm very good with names. He and I would write to each other about our mothers, and he was the head of the relics of the great saints.
Oh, the relics, yeah.
Exosip was the bone of saints.
Sure.
So anytime I wanted a saint, St. James was a patron saint, or St. Teresa, whatever, and the great, he would get them for me. So here, he was the vicar general, the second in command of the Diocese of Rome, not the papacy,
Right,
but the
right.
diocese. So when I got there, Ed McMahon and I were able to go right into the Sistine Chapel like we were gods. We just walked, a small G, by the way. We walked in, And he's a Jesuit, so he's very erudite. He wanted to see the library and read the books, and they said, "We're sorry, Father, but that's closed. That's all." But he took us right in, and it was a wonderful thing. But also while we were there, I got to meet somehow. I think it was. I'm not sure if it was Rome. I think it was Rome. There were 2 submarines. I could be wrong in this. It was NATO headquarters.
Is that when you wanted me to remind you of NATO?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And Ed somehow got me to meet some of the commanders. There's 2 subs here. And this, now, when I think of it, I'm going to show something here. I went back, I'm going to come forward and go back. I went back years later after working an electric boat, and I asked for a couple of pictures of the subs that I worked on. So when I went in, and Massachusetts is predominantly Catholic. I cannot throw this around, but anyway. And they were very good to me. He said, I'd be happy to give you. So they gave me some pictures, beautiful, glossy, 8.5 by 10 of ships swishing through the water. It was my ships that I built.
Wow.
And I said, boy, they were really big. And he said, Father, they're nothing. I said, what do you mean? They were big. I mean, when I think of it, by the way, I had top secret clearance.
Mm-hmm.
Because of fission, nuclear, all that
of
stuff.
course.
Yeah. So he took a pen like this, and he said, Jim, Father, because he said, this is your ship. I said, what? This is my ship. Look at this. Here's a pen. The man, this is the ship you worked on.
A 4th.
I said, no, at 110 maybe. It was
Oh.
this. I'm not
on
trying
the-
to correct
on
you.
the- oh,
this
on the
is
end.
there.
Okay.
This is
Yeah.
He said, I said, no, my God. I said, one sub could destroy the world. I mean, wrongly.
Sure.
Any sub, any country could I was flabbergasted, dumbfounded. This is my ship. I couldn't, because I worked on this thing day in and day out as an electrician pulling cables. He said, no, your class of sub was this. This is the new Trident or whatever it was. I said, my God.
How many crew on the Trident?
Oh, I don't know.
How many on the sub you built?
I don't even know that. All I know, though, I was just a shipyard bum.
Yep.
I was an electrician building the subs. That's it.
Did you ever make it to the catacombs?
No, never made
Is
it.
that in Rome?
Yes, and
Okay.
it's underneath, I understand.
right.
But I did have the blessing when I was there with Father Ed, because after we left the the shoreline in the La Maddalena, we came
yes.
back, we flew back to Rome, and I spent a week at the Bellarmino, which is the headquarters for the Jesuits, the Curia. Bring me back. This thing, now you're not going to be able to bring me back. Boy, I'm slipping a little bit. I'm so sorry about
Well, I
this.
asked you if you'd gone to the catacombs. You
Yeah,
said
no,
no.
I was privileged to have Mass.
Oh, yeah.
I had Mass, and it was at St. Peter's, and down underneath, they take and give you an altar boy. I had a couple people with me. Father Ed was not with me that day, and they take you, and I went to the chapel of Czestochowa that Pope John Paul II had just blessed and consecrated.
Wow.
So it was like a day or two before, so I was privileged to be there and have Mass for some nuns. There were some Indian nuns there and myself.
Now, a lot of people that aren't Catholic don't realize this, but the Mass, in public is an hour long.
Yes, give or take.
To make an official Mass, you can really shorten that thing up to including the consecration and I forgot. But I mean, isn't that correct? Now, when you were in Rome, would you do the full meal deal, or would you just shorten
No, of
that
course,
down
it'd be shorter, obviously.
So
yeah.
it was, and when I was an altar boy, it was what was required to make the Mass.
Yeah.
There were certain elements, I guess. Am I saying it correctly?
Yes, and like, for example, you may have a homily, you may not have a homily. You do things a little shorter, yes.
Yeah.
But I'm a conservative. So for me to have the Mass properly, it should be done properly
Yeah.
from beginning to end.
Yeah.
But in the military, one thing I did learn, and I was very good at this till this day, and Jerry might tell you, he's still with us here, that I kept it to an hour. Because I don't know about Army, because I was an Air Force chaplain, I was Army infantry, but the Air Force had one chapel
And they shared it?
on the base and shared by all faith groups.
Yep.
So here you have, again, here I'm looking at the audience, you have up here the the altar here, and the cross and so forth. And what they would do was it was almost cute. The cadre, the sergeants would come out before, if there was mass, then there'd be Protestant service or Jewish service, depending. They would just whip that cross and swing it across. There goes, no more body on the cross. No, the corpus is gone, it's just the Protestant cross. Eh? Or they would close it all up, and then it was Jewish services. And then there was the statues of Mary and Joseph, you know. So it was very wonderful. But you had to keep it to a certain modicum of time.
Yep.
Time was of the essence.
Yep.
And especially for combat stuff, that was even more of the essence. And I remember I heard you talking earlier off camera about the privileges in a combat zone. The church teaches, for example, with confession, there was a lot of talk recently, again, I'm a conservative priest, a lot of talk about general confessions, you know, that some bishops were allowing the absolution to be given to an audience.
Oh, I'd never heard of that.
Cannot be done, except combat's the only exception.
I'll be,
Because you were talking about, as soon as you said I was going to mention it, I didn't think of it,
Yep.
but that's the exception. However, the rule is, if you're in a group like Second World War, Vietnam, whatever war, and you're going to go into harm's way, the priest would say, I'm going to give you absolution, the Father, Son, making a sincere act of contrition,
Yep.
mention your sins, will give that blessing, the absolution, with the caveat that, God willing, you come out of harm's way and everything's fine, you would then need to go and seek a Father Confessor
Sure.
to go to confession
Sure.
and properly confess
Sure.
those sins. You know.
sure.
And the same thing.
And of course, the chaplain or the priest in Vietnam, when he said, now, my sons, your penance will be, you're going to the Cambodian border tomorrow.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't joke about that, but you're right. Yeah.
But,
Yes.
but that's,
Father, do you have about 47 days?
Do I have 47 days?
Yeah,
That
because-
I pray God gives me that and more.
John here, young John Frederick Quintrell, would like to begin confession, and we're going to give him as much time, and I'll stop. the
You know what they
recording.
say about he
has
was
a
without
long list.
sin, cast the first statement? That's, by the way, that's his son talking about it. Now I'm going to look right in the camera. That's his son off camera. The one who was sinless. Can I have that stone,
No,
please?
listen, I never said I was sinless. I simply asked if
The-
you would bring confession.
The inference was there. Don't interrupt. I'm allowed lightning bolts. The inference was there, and I'm allowed lightning bolts, 3 a day and 1 big one a week, and I haven't used any yet. So if you see, by the way, camera slide to the left there because there's going to be a lightning bolt over there. Sir, all I can say is God bless you, sir.
yes, thank you. So, where was I?
I don't know.
We're past the catacombs. I know that. No, I know that. But let's see, where was I going? Well, let's back up a little bit. When did you decide you wanted to become a priest?
Oh, that's.
I mean,
no
was
one's ever asked
that
this.
after the shipbuilding, or I mean, I
Oh,
need
yeah,
to put
yeah,
this
yeah.
in
I was
perspective.
already a famous disc jockey at my own markets. You know, I certainly wasn't Philly or New York or whatever, but climbing, going that way. And when I was in New Haven, Connecticut, as Jack Mitchell, JM and the AM at WAVZ in New Haven, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I dated a girl named Jennifer, and I'll tell you, maybe I should, I better not tell that one. It's not bad, but it's, I don't know how certain people might take to the, but she was a lovely gal. And I left there and moved to Scranton to WARM, which was one of the stations I wanted to. As soon as they called, I left. I mean, it was that,
Wow.
that
So it was
5,000
a
watts.
better prestigious,
5,000
better
watts.
market, all that.
75% of the pie share, the marketing pie share, in all of America. 75% of the audience. So I went back to work there. I met a girl named Judy, and unfortunately it worked out. Well, maybe fortunately, and not only maybe, I'm sure fortunately, she had married. She was in love with another fellow and me. So, but I was toying with the idea. I remember taking. I don't know why I'm saying this. You got me feeling too comfortable here. She started coming to mass with me. I became a daily communicator, but she wasn't inclined to that. It wasn't.
Was she a convert? Is that what
No,
you're
no, Catholic gal,
okay.
little Polish gal. Well, a Polish gal.
Yeah.
And she just, you know, I got that feel. But somehow through all of that, I began to realize that something was happening. And then basically what I did, I feel like this is a military thing, but what I did was I went on a retreat. So I would recommend anybody, not only Catholics, go on a retreat.
Retreats
If there's
are great.
anything you want to discern, I was walking around a building, a monastery with lawyers, doctors, judges, a plumber, dishwashers, and praying the rosary and having a retreat master give a retreat. It was phenomenal. And it was there, I went to a priest named Father Bill Jameson, and I went to confession. Now, I can share, my own situation, my own life. I can never betray the seal of confession, per se, but so I remember telling him I'm discerning this possible calling, and he said, Jim, I think, normally I tell somebody to come back in a year, but he said, you're 27, you're doing pretty well in radio, you're quite successful, I think you have a calling. So, here I am, 41 years later.
Did you go to seminary?
Yes, I
Where
went
did
to
you go?
the seminary in Saints Cyril and Methodius Byzantine Catholic Seminary in Pittsburgh, and I spent 4 years there.
Is that like a college education?
No, because the bishop the only injunction he gave me was go back and receive your degree. So I went back at age 20, so I was actually 30. Went back for 2 more years at University of Scranton, a Jesuit college, and received my degree. Then I went into theology for 4 years, from 74 to 78.
Was that a prerequisite at that time?
Every priest must have a master's degree.
I didn't know.
Oh, well, every priest must have a baccalaureate or
I had no
bachelor's degree.
idea. I
Yes.
absolutely had
Yeah,
no idea.
And in the old days, as you're referring, I believe is what you're referring to, John, in the old days, they had junior high school seminaries and high school seminaries, where you would actually train as a high school seminarian to go on the theology.
I'll be.
Yeah, so no, before you could go to theology, you had to have a minimum of a baccalaureate. And of course, once you finished your master's in theology, normally you finish with a master's of theology or a master's of religion. And I have actually 4 degrees now. When I came back from overseas, I finished, I PCS from Little Rock Air Force Base to Turkey, the Persian Gulf and all that. I was in the zone of combat operation in 90, the Ritz on the first time around. And when I came back to Texas, I was given enough time to finish my master's degree in journalism. And I finished that at age 51, magna cum laude. So I'm very proud
think
of that.
after this knowledge, I should be referring to you as Dr. Fahrenheit. You have so many degrees. I mean, come on.
Let me check your temperature then. Fahrenheit.
I'm gonna. This is totally off the subject. We talked earlier, and I told you I was from San Diego.
That's right, KGB.
And you said, hey, San Diego was my home away from home. Do you remember Alcala, the big Catholic college?
Now you got to remember, my contact with that is 2 things: a vision of future career, of big-time radio,
Yes.
KGB, and my friend Father Jerry Hamperzonian, who was a Vietnam major, chaplain,
Okay.
major rank Army in Vietnam, who served you men
Yeah.
specifically, and I would go to visit him. So that's my contact with that. So as far as knowing a lot,
Yeah,
I
but
would
the
not know a
Catholic
lot.
college Alcala was up there. Well, when I was in 8th grade, they did job fairs. And they'd take us 8th grade boys, and they'd take us up there, and there'd be tables of all the different orders.
Okay, wow.
The Jesuits
That's what I
that-
mean. And in those days, it was high school. You would actually have high school.
Yeah.
You finished up to 12th
So
grade.
they were prospecting us in 8th grade.
Sure, looking for
And-
vocations.
Yeah, and my sister, they did it in high school as a senior. They went, and my sister went into the convent Orange teaching degree of Orange up there.
Wonderful.
And she was there for a year and then decided it wasn't her call and so forth. But yeah, interesting.
Now, I almost got a job at KRLA with Casey Kasem.
Oh my goodness.
And I was rocking at WSCR. I was really rocking. I was good. 7 to midnight, did the TD Barber
Oh
show.
man, the sweet spot.
Did
That's
you meet
right.
Casey Kasem?
I did not, but I was going to go to work with him, and there was a fellow named Russ Reagan. Russ had just started as president of Uni Records. Ronnie was a nobody knew about it. They then got Neil Diamond. They had the Foundations, Baby, Now That I've Found You, I Can't Let You Go, from Australia. They had monster after monster. So one day he called me, And I was an affable fellow, as I am now, and I would play records, and I was in record promotion, so Russ would send me these things, and I played the records, because I was music director, especially at WSCR, #2 rocker in the top 50 station in the country.
Did they ever grease your palm to play?
We'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay.
I'll be honest on that.
Now, which one of you is the priest? Which one's going to start confessing here? Is this-
Okay.
Oh.
No, relax. Lord, not one lightning bolt, can we go for two? Take it at let me see, longitude, latitude. No, he's got me thrown off where I'm at
Sorry,
here.
he asked, so Casey Kasem, and then the guy, you were really the guy that was rocking 7 to midnight, and then.
Well, that was me.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you were talking about the other guy at the station.
Yeah,
You were-
Casey Kasem worked there. Oh, Russ Reagan
Yeah.
with Uni Records. So he says, Jim, send me an air check. Every jock has an air check. And what you usually do, for example, I call Jerry, my best buddy, my music buddy. I'd say, Jerry, throw a tape on, don't let me know when. Just throw a tape on and tape me. You know, in those days it was real
Oh,
to real.
yes, yeah.
Because if you know it's on, yes, it's a Jim Drukker show on the Mighty 590, and I'm going to rock and roll and make you forget about it. It's not me. It's not real. So I had this real great air check, sent it to him, and it was done by a friend. And he said, Jim, I got news for you. I got you a job in Los Angeles. I said, you're kidding me. 2 years in radio?
My, oh, my.
And I'm going to be in Los Angeles? He said, you're going to work at KRLA. So all of a sudden, the next day, I'm ready to pack it in, tell my boss, Tommy Rice at WSCR, the owner, and Vince Luciano, Vince Alberts, was the program director, wonderful man, a blessed memory. And he calls and said, Jim, I got bad news. You had the job, but he said, believe it or not, a jock from WLS, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, et cetera, right? That's what, I want to go from here, up to that,
pecking
right?
order, so to speak.
To be famous, even more famous than I was somewhat relatively. And he said he got the job. So somebody went from the third market to the second and took the job that I would have had. And I probably would not be here as a priest, I don't think.
Maybe, sure. Destiny,
I
though,
shouldn't say
you're-
probably. I should say
Yeah.
there's a chance I
Sure.
might not be.
Now, L.A.,
Yeah, great market.
you had to have run into or known Dick Lane.
Sure, yes.
Wrestling, roller derby.
Yes.
This guy, his claim to fame, he had one movie, and he played the Boston Blackie.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, Father, when I was 8 years old in San Diego, my dad was a self-taught television repairman. And so he always had a lot of televisions around the garage fixing them.
A lot of tubes.
Hundreds, thousands maybe. And sometimes people wouldn't come and pick up their set or pay for it. So there were so many sets in the garage, he moved one into my bedroom.
Okay.
He moved one into my sister's room. I plugged it in. And guess what came on? Channel 5.
I was going to say American Bandstand.
No, Channel 5, wrestling.
Oh.
Wednesday
okay.
nights at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
Dick Lane. And it started something in me that I've been a wrestling fan, an avid fan for all my life. My son can tell you the history of wrestling from the time he was, how old, Tim?
Oh, I was 8 years old.
So Dick Lane, did you ever have an opportunity to run into him or any of
I
that
did
crew?
not, and to be quite frank, I'm not really into wrestling. I like it. I enjoy it. I see it, and I'm sure you'll agree completely. It's entertainment.
Sure. Oh, of course it
more
is.
than anything
Yeah,
else. And my stepfather was a wrestler, for what that's worth.
Really?
A little Italian fella. And I remember Gorgeous George.
Oh, yes.
But that's it. I'm not really into wrestling.
Did you know any other famous people in L.A.?
Well, in L.A., like I said, hopefully I would have been working for KRLA, which didn't work out. But some friends of mine, one friend was a fellow named Red Schwartz, Jewish fellow, wonderful man, was the head of promotion for Roulette Records. Roulette, Joey D and the Starlighters, Jimmy Bowen, I'm Sticking With You, Party Doll, Buddy Knox, etc. And they had the oldies series. So he moved there. And a fellow that Jerry and I would both know of, Alan Hotlin, who was with WIP, the #1 station in Philly. easy listening, but it was still number one across the board, even over WIBG and WFIL, which came later. So I would get to know those people. And then my best buddy, Jerry, he would go back there often. And I would meet him there because he was a VA priest, which later I would become in a different city. And I was Air Force, and we meet there, and I had, you know, a relationship in that sense. And there was another couple of chaplains that were at 29 Palms on the outskirts.
I
you
know
from the
exactly-
Navy,
I know exactly where it's at.
Because the Navy chaplaincy service Marines and
course.
and Navy personnel as well.
Yep.
But speaking of that, if I may, I was saying earlier before, which was really important to me, and it just dawned on me, I was talking about my brother Joseph. He's buried in England at Cambridge Cemetery, and I did have the blessing to do a 1 or 2 month TDY when I was a pastor of a church in Massachusetts, assigned to 325th, I think it was, Combat Support Squadron at Westover, C-130s then, C-5s later, and now I understand closed, sadly. But I was able to go over and spend a whole month there at Lakenheath. Lakenheath, RAF Lakenheath, which was F-111s, and ironically, when I was in Turkey and the Persian Gulf broke out, some of the planes came in from Lakenheath,
For
F-111s.
for heaven's sake.
And from Spangdahlem came Warthogs, A-10s, and we had some pretty big planes coming in. C-130 jammers from Hurlburt, Florida. But anyway, I got to go to my brother's grave.
KC-135s.
Absolutely, the
Lot-
refueling,
from
fantastic.
from where I was living at the time, Great Falls, Montana, Maelstrom Air Force Base.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, one colonel that I served with, who was the head of the MAC unit at USAFE, Interlake Air Base, he was from Montana. Trey Moran, full bird colonel, and he was a former security man, a C-5 pilot, was the head of MAC, where all the planes were flying up for Military Airlift Command. But I had the opportunity to go to my brother's grave, had some pictures taken, had mass at the cemetery chapel, Cambridge chapel. Keep in mind, I was his baby brother. I was 1 year old when he left, 3 years old when he died. He was 25 years old. And so I had the blessing to have the mass there. And some people on the airplane, when I was flying over commercially to do my 1 month or 2 month TDY in 1981, had said, why don't you take your cross off your uniform? But keep in mind, he was U.S. Army Air Corps. I was U.S. Air Force.
Yes.
He was a tech sergeant.
Yep.
I became, not so much, I'm an officer.
Yeah.
But his baby brother is now kind of the legacy he's carrying. So I had mass, and they took a picture, and one of the chaplains, unbeknownst, not asking, sent it to Airman Magazine, and they did the story, No Cross to Bear. I've been trying to track that down to get a copy of it. It was a one-page article about me taking my cross off 40 years later, putting it in my brother's grave with permission of the caretaker. I dug it in deep. And then I also went to the field. And on the tarmac, which was now owned by a farmer and a couple of Catholic people, a judge, Brendan Fulham from Lakenheath, he took me to the tarmac, and I saw he was in the 8th Air Force, 385th Bombardment Group, 551st Bombardment Squadron. And the Quetzal huts, well, looking at, say over here, had color codes, 550, 551, 552nd, so it's just like flashback to 12 o'clock high with Gregory Peck.
Wow.
I cried more there than I did at the grave. That was my brother Joseph.
And so then you became a priest.
Yes.
And did you know that you wanted to be a chaplain from the very beginning?
I think what happened when I was at a parish at St. Michael's Byzantine Catholic Church in South Hadley, Massachusetts, 10 miles from Chicopee, from the base, Westover, there was a Lieutenant Colonel, Father Ed Lockrit, and he said, Jim, why don't you were in Army? I said, yeah, I was infantry, so why don't you, I said, wow, it'd be fantastic. So
you hadn't even thought about it really before?
Not at all, but there was an opening in the reserve. He was in the Guard. And he told me later, the reason he pushed me to get into it, which it worked out obviously, was because he needed to buy his cigarettes. And he was retired, but couldn't get his card till he turned 60. He was only 54 then or so.
Oh, my gosh.
So, but he also meant it in a nice
Sure.
way. So I actually was commissioned there, first lieutenant, and eventually worked my way up to captain. And I did my chaplain school at Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama. And but anyway, Massachusetts was wonderful, and I enjoyed Westover very much. And I had the blessing to go over and have Mass for my brother Joe and see his grave. I was the only one in our whole family, and I'm 77
Oh,
now.
my gosh.
The only one.
When was your first, were you put to active duty when you went over to the Gulf? No, is that being an active?
No, what happened was I was reserve. I PCS'd reserve to Philadelphia because my bishop sent me back to have 2 parishes. Then I went to the Guard. Got an Air Force Commendation
And that's
Medal
getting
there.
you closer to
Active duty.
action.
Then, well, and I wasn't activated so much as my mom died. My mother, Margaret, of blessed memory. So he said, if you'd like to go, you may go. So he gave me permission, so I went active duty November 27, 1987. And my first base was Little Rock. PCS to Incirlik, spent 2 years there before, during, and after storm, which became Operation Provide Comfort for the Kurds, many of whom were Catholic, if not all. Then
And you were there?
Yes, sir, I was
You were
there.
in the field?
Yes, sir, I was absolutely in the field.
Okay.
Then I PCS from there to San Antonio. Didn't want to leave, but they wanted me there. And then I got out of active duty. I spent 5 years active duty Air
Okay.
Force.
And you obviously, being a chaplain, interacted with all these guys and women and
Absolutely.
and so forth, and soldiers, and the reason I'm going to ask you this is because my guys are going to be watching this.
Okay.
And guys that served with us in Vietnam are going to be watching this. And so many of us came home with a lot of problems. And I know you dealt with people because the Gulf guys had a lot of problems.
A lot of PTSD.
And that's where I'm going with this. If some of my guys are watching this, and you know, so many of us have had to go to treatment even for PTSD, but some guys won't go and for whatever reason. What would be your best advice for a man our age that still is suffering with the PTSD and yet hasn't actually gone and gotten any help for it? What would your best advice be?
I have encountered what you just said as a chaplain, not only there, but also as a VA chaplain for 5 years, almost 10 years as a VA chaplain. Most don't want to talk about things. They don't want to talk about especially the horrors and the war and the killings and so forth. But I would simply say that God has given each of us the ability to think, the ability to pray, the ability to be cognizant of Him, to be cognizant of our own weaknesses, to be cognizant of our strengths. And in the weaknesses, especially through PTSD, maladies like this, not only physical wounds, but mental, emotional, spiritual wounds, you must address that. See a chaplain. If that's the first start, if that's the first way you can get into being helped, that God can help you. But God has given you the strength to seek this, and you should and you must. Chaplaincy is the core. I remember my first month in chaplain school at Maxwell Air Force Base, and this is whatever, any faith, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, whatever, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever faith anyone is, we are a ministry of presence. You shared a story with me off camera earlier about a chaplain, that whether he was Catholic or Protestant, he was a chaplain. And his presence there was the presence of God.
Yes.
The presence of God. The presence of God in their midst. And it's in the VA system. There are chaplains in the VA system that are tremendous people, men and women of faith that can lift you from the throes of this perdition, of this, whatever it is. They can help you. And I will keep you in my prayers through this ministry of media. Pray for me.
How do the chaplains today fulfill that mission that you just described when the Army or the services tells them that they're no longer required to mention Jesus or...
We talked about that earlier, and here's my thinking, and it's going to be interesting. It's going to be maybe an opposite of what you're thinking. When we went to chaplain school, we were taught, and it made spiritual logical sense, that we are to respect everybody of every faith, of no faith. And remember one time on the mobility line, some soldier got up like a punk to me. I'm a Philadelphia man. Nobody.
Sure.
And he said, "I'm nothing." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. You're going to be nothing on your dog tag. So we have to put something. You're either going to be Protestant, Catholic, Jewish. They're the four major faith groups. Or we're going to put no preference. How's about that, dude?" That I didn't say dude mean.
Sure.
Because he was giving it to me. He simmered down. He said, "Okay, Father, we put no preference, NP." That was on his dog tag.
Sure.
No preference. God is present in all things in all ways, and especially through the chapter. But getting back to the issue of the thing, when I pray, even when I gave the prayer on the house floor of the Harrisburg to the awesome men and women of the founding of our nation, Harrisburg, PA, I said, "Let us bow our heads. Heavenly Father, Lord." That's Jesus.
Yes.
Jesus is my Lord. Jesus is my God. However, there are others who may not believe Jesus is God. They may believe in him, think he's wonderful, but they don't believe in the same thing. So I believe that has to be respected. And that's what we're taught. We're taught that. Because I know there were a couple of cases, I think, in the Navy. One chaplain sued and because he said he wants to say Jesus. Now, by the way, the military chaplaincy does not keep me from saying the word Jesus or the name Jesus, except when it's in a pluralistic setting. So make that clear and make that very straight. So that chaplain was not told, I would think, I could be wrong, that you can't say Jesus. Because if I'm at Mass, I have every right and responsibility to say Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, and have that Mass accordingly. Take the Old Testament reading, the reading of St. Paul, and the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and say Jesus, Jesus, Jesus as many times as I want. But if I'm in a crowd, I have to respect the crowd. That's what I should have started with, but it's coming to clarity with it. Because I remember one time, I was listening to WBZ and a fellow named Dan Ray, 50,000 watts, 1030 on the dial, great station. And a former disc jockey there, a buddy of mine, Dick Summer, worked there years ago, phenomenal disc jockey, great talent, the poet laureate of radio. But anyway, they were talking about the House Speaker in Harrisburg, Keith McCall, telling people that they cannot say the word Jesus. So I called and I said, "You're wrong." Because I just 3 times gave the prayer on the House floor, and yes, Keith asked to see the prayer, which I didn't have any problem with. Why not? Let him see my prayer. And in it were the right words. Heavenly Father, Lord, because I respect it. There may be Jewish people there. There may be Hindus. There may be Buddhists. There may be people that don't believe in God. And I said that on 50,000 watts. Not as a DJ, but as a priest. So he is allowed to say Jesus. Not only is he allowed, he should. But in certain settings, he has to respect the setting of the value and the faith value of each of those persons, those souls.
And as a chaplain, and it goes back to my Vietnam experience, you had to serve everybody.
Absolutely.
I mean, there were non-believers, obviously, but there were Catholics and all religions. And when that one chaplain came out, he had to be the chaplain for everybody. So I think that's a very good clarification on your part. You could certainly say Jesus to me in the field.
I'm responsible to say Jesus to you, because why? I didn't give 40, 50 years of my life, to not be able to say Jesus.
Yeah, and yet, that's the way it was in Vietnam. They took care of all of us. It didn't matter what denomination was. And I don't ever remember feeling, and none of my buddies ever felt, like the chaplain was taking preference of one over another.
I do know I had one case, and maybe I'm wrong bringing this up, but I was at a certain VA, I won't say where, and I'm not saying it of one faith group, but there was a minister of another faith group, not even Christian, and a veteran Catholic came to me and said that he had gone to confession to this minister. And I said, whoa, what? So when he explained it, that's wrong. I no more have the right to make you think I'm Protestant, that
Yes.
you're Protestant, than I have a right to make you think I'm Catholic and you're Catholic.
I got it, yeah.
I am what I am. I'm responsible to be what I am and to preach the gospel according to my faith and my belief in Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, the Blessed Mother, Mary, the Theotokos. That's what I stand for.
So how did he go to confession to a non,
Well,
why
I don't know.
did he
Again,
do it?
I may be bringing up something, a nest of hornets here. I don't know. Because later I had a talk with him, and he said, well, what's the difference? I said, Chaplain, there's a lot of difference.
I got you. Okay, I see what you're getting
There's a
at.
lot of difference.
Okay.
And I said, you have to respect that Catholic that you tell him he needs to go to confession.
Yep.
God
Father-
bless you all.
No,
Love you.
And Father, this is just the end of part one, and this is going to be a series. We're going to actually, this is going to be turned into a series. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. This has been, I told you before, there's no accidents where God's concerned. And when he sets appointments, divine appointments, we keep them. And I believe in my heart that this was a divine appointment today.
This is our journey. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you.
Love you. From the first shirt, are you Father Drukker? I said, yeah, yes I am. And he said, Father, I have a young man here. We just caught him in the showers trying to hang himself. So long story real short, I went right over and I convinced him to go to see the psychiatrist. I learned a few things from it, by the way. But I got talking to him, turned out he was Catholic, and I convinced him to see the psychiatrist, and he asked me to go with him the first time. I obliged. I asked the psychiatrist, Captain, Air Force chaplain, psychiatrist. And fortunately, through the quick action of the first sergeant, we're able to dissolve this whole thing and bring him back to a good mental stability. And I was part of it with the psychiatrist. But one thing I learned, which you may not know this, and you're into this very deeply, is that they made him sign a waiver that the information he shared could be given, I'm looking for the proper words, to his company commander or anyone in the need to know. And I said, you can't do that.
Should be a
I said,
confidentiality
you
issue.
can't, and they said, no, it was the rule. It was the rule, the Air Force rule, that they had the right to complete commander. I said, I'm thinking about suppose he's a dingaling, or suppose he's a worse dingaling and doesn't understand psychoses and problems, and he may end up destroying this boy. And they made this boy sign that. Luckily, I was able to help him work through that as well. But I was totally I couldn't be too open about it because I would have frightened him, and we never would have been able to help him. I'm a little uncomfortable doing this. Believe it or not, as big mouth as I have, I don't feel the right here, and I'm going to back off. But just don't be angry at me to do anything. I'm just,
So you mean I can't just ask you how you what you did in the beginning, and just to kind of get a little picture of how you got involved in radio, and then what you did after that, and that's kind of what I'm interested in.
Okay, yeah, that's all right.
So
if that's what you,
I don't
want to get too much into it.
No,
because you know what? I don't know if you know this. The Kurds, who are our enemy,
Yep.
They were Catholic.
I guess I didn't know that.
Many of them
I'll be darned.
are our enemy.
Well, I know the Catholics have been exterminated over in that country terribly. But anyway, Tim,
if you want to get into the music, absolutely.
I just have a few
I prefer
things.
you understand. I think
do.
you would understand.
I do.
And especially, and we're family here. It reached a peak with me as a chaplain that my primary care ordered me to have nothing to do anymore with chaplaincy in the VA, because things were coming at me, and there was one soldier, a Vietnam soldier, that was ordered by his colonel to throw the Kong out the helicopter
Oh.
thousands of feet.
You know what, I witnessed it.
And he was ordered it, and he's Catholic, and he's been. I said, Mike, and of course I had to be a counselor and a priest and a confessor, etc. But I couldn't. It just. What can I? Well, you should know.
I know.
There's no need. How can you touch that? How can you heal that? Only God can heal that.
Yes.
I was devastated, and I wasn't ordered. I would just strongly recommend. And then I left because I wanted to stay in the chaplaincy forever.
Well-
And the VA chaplaincy, you could literally die with your boots on.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
there was a father, pardon me for talking about, I can't think of the head priest's name, Ron something. And he said, one day I'm with him going down to Hampton, to get schooling, 2 months of schooling out of Hampton. No, I could probably teach them.
Sure, sure.
I mean, in a good way, not in a boasting way. It's just you have to go through it, the I's, the dot, the line, the T's. And we got a call, and he said, "You're not going to believe this, Jim. I just got a call from Pastor so-and-so, Baptist minister." He said, "Yeah, he's 94, and he's the VA chaplain at so-and-so, and he just died." I said, "You're kidding." He said, "You can stay in the VA till you die."
Yeah, well, I told you the chaplain that was at Sheridan Hospital where I was at, he actually, that was when.
Yeah, you said about the book, I remember.
And not only that, but the military came down and said the chaplains can't mention Jesus, and they can't.
Let's get into that with this. I'll talk about.
Okay.
That I will talk about.
Okay.
And I'll tell you my opinion.
Well,
because you may not like it, and you might like it.
He quit.
Okay. Yeah.
And he was a tremendous guy, but he drew the line.
Now was he the one that was the priest?
No, he was.
Okay.
No, he
Yeah,
was.
is
He
it-
was just
yeah, okay.
a Protestant
Okay.
chaplain, but it broke his heart.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll just give us the starter and we'll go. We're here again in Philadelphia, and we're visiting my good friend and fellow veteran, Father Jim Drukker.
Amen.
And Father, the time that we spent together on part one was truly an experience not only for me, but anybody that's going to be watching this is going to see a completely, when people think of Catholic priests, first of all, they think of someone that out of high school, went to seminary, came out a young priest in a parish, and yada. But that wasn't your story at all, and so it's interesting that on part one they're going to actually see what your first careers were, and now today what we're here to do is to talk a little bit about how you got involved in the military. So I guess to start that, and I'm going to ask you something I don't know the answer to. So were you a priest first before you got involved with the military, or explain how that goes?
My backdrop is back in the 60s. I was like any one of us. I'm talking because there's a room of veterans there, so to speak. It's not in the visual camera at this moment. Matter of fact, I was going to bring my draft card, 1A. that says it all. So 64 to 70, I was in the Reserve and Guard Army, and I spent 6 months, and this much away from being fully activated to go to NAM. We were told that clearly, we're going to NAM, and things changed. But I did 6 months of intensified infantry training, all infantry, at Fort Jackson. And there was a movie on last night, interestingly, on the hotel I'm staying at, McGuire Air Base. That was, I can't think, Richard Whitmark. And when all this stuff started coming on, I can remember the monkey bars and having breakfast and going crazy and peeling potatoes, buds, and all that stuff. But so we had 2 months of basic infantry, 2 months of we had little leave time to go back home. 2 months of advanced infantry, not individual training, but advanced infantry, M60, et cetera, and then 2 months of basic unit training. And then I spent 6 years. And then years later, I was ordained a Catholic priest in 1978, 74 to 78. I had my theological training at St. Cyril Methodius Byzantine Catholic Seminary in Pittsburgh. And my bishop, my religious superior, knew I had a background of military. And I was stationed, my first official pastorate, parish as a pastor, was in South Hadley, Massachusetts. And for any Air Force people out there, you know, Chicopee's there. And when I was there, they had C-130s. I understand they had gone to C-5s, and now I understand the base, sadly, I hope not, but I've been told that it's been closed. It was a great base. There was a priest there named Father Pete Lockwood. We say in our Catholic faith of blessed memory, he's passed on. Mm-hmm. And he came to me with not so altruistic motives, because he later told me the truth. He said, Jim, why don't you join the Air Force? I said, well, Pete, I was military back during NAM, infantry, etc., with total training, infantry. He said, well, let me tell you. So anyway, we're having a 60th anniversary of our parish at St. Michael's Byzantine Catholic Church, South Hadley, Massachusetts, about 10, 15 miles from Chicopee and Westover Air Force Base. So he was at Barnes, at the Air National Guard, state of Massachusetts, lieutenant colonel type. And he said, look, your bishop's coming in. So anyway, long story short, he kind of cornered the bishop, said, you know, Father Jim's been military prior. What do you? And he grabbed right onto it. So he was like a plant. Next thing I know, yeah, we do these things. Yeah, I know, a little conniving. But he was a lieutenant colonel, sir, so he outranked me. So anyway, next thing you know, I'm in the reserve. The bummer was they were going to give me captain, and there was a young fella, I hope I'm not talking all too much, I feel like I'm talking too much, but a fellow named Ron Coper, who was, I think he was a chief, well, at the time senior master sergeant. Wonderful young man, good Catholic boy. And they needed a Catholic priest. I served with Father Ryan, who was a lieutenant colonel. So he said, Father, I got your captain bars, I'm going to pin them off for you. And all of a sudden, through ROPA, Reserve Officer something, they were bringing chaplains as the same thing of all the professional corps, medical, chaplaincy, and JAGs on as first lieutenants. So here I was already devoted. So here,
From the get-go.
I went from captain to first lieutenant. So anyway, I pinned on my first lieutenant bars. In the meantime, Pete finally came up and said, you know what, Jim, he said, you know why I have you going in? Because he said, I need cigarettes. And he said, Pete, I hope you're not listening from heaven. But he said, I need cigarettes and I'm leaving and I'm not 60 yet, so I can retire full retirement reserve guard. So I said, fine. So of course, I was a dutiful brother priest, and he was a wonderful man, though. He was what we call the dean of the area, of the Diocese of Springfield. And every time they'd have dinners, or if I got lonely, because priesthood can be somewhat lonely, whether in the field or in the parish or whatever, because all the people around you, but it's a lonely life, you know, as you know, through celibacy and so forth. So anyway, he got me in. I started doing my drills there. Then I PCS, as we know, military talk, or the bishop PCS'd me, and my religious superior, back to Philly, my hometown. And I was stationed in this area. And then I did some duty with the 9/11th, which was part of the wing with Niagara Falls, Philedelphia, and I'm not sure the third part of the wing. I think it might have been Ohio. And I did duty there, and then went into the Guard.
Now, are you a chaplain?
Oh, by that time, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
Yeah, I was already a priest now, 78 I was ordained. My parish was 3 years later. I got my first parish in Massachusetts, St. Michael's. Westover's there. Pete Lockren, Father Lockren, sets up the whole scene as the dean with my superior. They come in for the 60th anniversary and convinced them very quickly. He was very, very amenable. And he said, sure, Father, you can join. You have that total permission from your religious superior, what we call the endorsing agency or agent. So then I then PCS'd to Philly because of my religious needs of the diocese and religious order. And I was stationed in Pennsylvania and did duty in Philly. And then I found out they had an opening at the Air National Guard. Now this is Guard, Reserve, the Guard. I'm accruing time as a reserve officer now, I'm not enlisted, because I had those 6 years, good credit. And I moved to the 111th Tactical Air Support Group in Willow Grove. which has since been closed.
And not to interrupt,
Sure.
but just for clarification, when you're a chaplain and you're assigned to someplace, is it like you have a chapel and an office and guys just can come in and see you? How does it, what
Yeah,
does
yeah.
it actually look like?
First of all, it's so difficult to get priests into the military because of the very criteria. Matter of fact, when I first went in, a lot of my brother priests, my seniors especially, older folk, older priests, were all against it because it's a war mechanism.
Oh,
It's a war mechanism.
I
You have no idea.
I would have never thought of
Yeah,
that.
and that's why I'm sharing it to the audience. Matter of fact, there was a young Lutheran minister. What the heck was his name? I can't think of his name offhand. I'm very good with names. And he was in that area, and they had a need in the guard where Pete was retiring, and I was reserved. Let's flash back now to Massachusetts, Westover. And he was iffy. And I said to him, I said, look, it's a wonderful life military. You're serving good people. It's not a war mechanism. We are a country devoted to helping people. And I said, all you would be doing, Father, because he was a Lutheran minister, is helping your flock and anyone who would need help. And you can't be called arms because you're a chaplain. Matter of fact, Geneva Convention, we all know, I'm sure all of us veterans cannot carry weapons. And there's certain codes and rules we follow. We have a cadre, sergeant that protects us and so forth, but not to go off path. So I did convince him, but in a good, caring way, he went up to full bird. I remained a captain. I wish he had been my commander. Maybe he would have done my OER,
Sure.
my officer evaluation report, and made me maybe a major or something.
Sure.
But anyway, he was a fine, wonderful young man. But you're right. So there's a struggle. It's interesting, as you said, John. The struggle is that the priests don't understand, or I'm sure that ministers as well, or superior ministers, do not understand what our real role is. And our role fundamentally and primarily is to be the presence of God. To be the presence of God. The rabbis carry tablets, or if you're Army, up in the lapel in the Air Force here. And for any Christian chaplain, Catholic, Protestant, of any denomination, we carry the cross. And also the Orthodox, Russian and Greek. And there are four major faith groups. Now, I don't know if that's changed since, but back in the 80s and 90s, Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, which means the Orthodox Church, capital O, we say, that would be Greek or Russian, and Jewish. And then the chaplain corps has a 2-star general, and it flip-flops. I shouldn't say it flip-flops, I can't say determinatively, but it's clear it does. Usually it's a Catholic. And then the deputy chaplain would be a 1-star, would be a Protestant, and vice versa.
Okay.
A Protestant,
Sure.
Catholic, and a Jewish rabbi, because there's not many of them. By ratio, we've had a few chief chaplains who were Jewish chaplains as well. So we have all these things working. I came back. I then joined the matter of fact, we had a guest speaker at the VDA in Harrisburg recently talk about the Dragonflies, 38s, reconnaissance during them. Ironically, when I got to the 111 Tactical Air Support Group here in Philadelphia, Willow Grove, we had Dragonflies. No, I'm sorry. We had Dragonflies, and then it went to Warhawks, the A-10s.
Right, right.
That's after I had left. And then eventually I went active duty.
And what did that look like?
I spent 2 years. Ironically, my first base was going to be Pope. I thought that was pretty cute. But I was a little overweight. As we fellas know, and gals, military, you don't want to be in the fat boys program. So I lost 35 pounds, really worked hard, and I waited 6 months to actually go active duty.
What's the Fat Boys program?
The Fat Boys program is if you're 1 pound, it happened to be once in my military career, I was 1 stinking pound over the first sergeant. He really rode me. So if you're supposed to be 110, you're 6 foot tall, and they do the body
Oh, yeah,
thing
the
and all
mass
that
index,
stuff.
yeah.
So if you're 1 pound over, they put you on, you have to lose that pound or pounds within a given period of time. And anyway, that's the Fat Boy program. So let me see if I can bring myself back to where I was. Yeah, so then I went active duty eventually, and there were
Pope?
No, I was supposed to go to Pope,
Oh.
but because I had to lose this weight, you know, I'm still a reserve officer now. Keep in mind at the Guard. As a matter of fact, I had to sign out of the Air National Guard officially as an officer and sign in and be commissioned again, even
Okay.
though I was commissioned as an officer and a gentleman, etc. And I went to Little Rock Air Force Base was my first assignment. I loved it. There was the 329th Combat Support Group, a bunch of wonderful people. And there was a priest there, Father Adam Sufol. I never forget his name because it was Polish. I'm a Slav, S-L-A-V. And he was a Franciscan. So I spent 2 years there. I took his place. I was the senior Catholic chaplain. I chuckled about that because normally there's only one Catholic, so you are just the chaplain. I think it was a 8916 AFSC MOS, and then when you become senior in 8924. So I then became senior Catholic chaplain, and then I pretty much ran my own program. You know,
Again, was it chapel?
yes,
So you had the chapel, you
Yes.
did the services on Sunday,
yes. Yeah.
confessions?
Yeah, now the difference, very good, yeah, forgive me for not getting it, I should have, of course, but the difference is, I'm getting a little camera shy all of a sudden for a second there. When you go active duty, you have there's a senior Protestant, and normally, when I say normally as normal is, there are a lot of Protestant chaplains. A lot of Protestant chaplains, ministers like to be in the military. It's a great life, you're an officer, you get housing, et cetera, et cetera. Priests, we just go where the bishops or religious superiors send us. And so I was at Little Rock, and I was there 2 years, and I eventually became senior Catholic chaplain, so I read my whole program. A thing that might be of note, especially for Army personnel out there in the audience, is that the Army, as I understood it, because one of my best friends was a Vietnam major, chaplain major rank Army, Orthodox priest, and he was in Nam. He was in Vietnam as an officer and a chaplain. In the Army, he had shared with me then, again, whether it's like that now, I don't know, but it was interesting, because in the Army they had individual chapels. The Orthodox chapel, the Catholic chapel, the Protestant chapel, etc. Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, and Jewish. Now, I understood, and I don't want to speak out of turn because this is on camera, it's put for the public, but I understood that technically, I think that might have been illegal. I think. I was kind of told that somewhere, or that's in my wavelengths of my brain. Now, the difference, whether it was or not, I don't know, but that seemed to be the setting, an Army setting. I never witnessed that, but that was what I was told. But it's interesting, because in the Air Force, you have one chapel. That's it. No matter what base you're at, whether overseas, here, one chapel, and each service is handled by that minister.
Mm-hmm.
Protestant, Orthodox, Catholic, Jewish. And the interesting thing, first time I got out, well, I should take it back because I was already reserved. But in the setting of the chapel, they say this is the chapel back here, the cross, the cadre, the sergeant, the enlisted staff would come in, they pull a cord, and the cross comes out with the corpus, with the body of Christ. And after the Mass is over, they come out and swing it. Out comes the cross with no body, no corpus on it. That's the Protestant service. Then they take and swing it again. It goes wherever there's nothing. They close the curtains up. They take the statues of Jesus and Mary, one each side. They cover that up. And then they have a Jewish service. See, it's very functional. And it taught me to be very precise in timing, because when you have Mass, it has to be 1 hour, no more than 1 hour. If it's less, that's even better. Because right after me was the Protestant minister, and they're coming in. We had one place I was at, one base. It was a black chaplain, wonderful man, and he used to have a gospel service. And me being a former musician and singer-songwriter and entertainer. I would finish my mass and go right back to the last pew and sit there, and I'd be hallelujah all over the place and rocking with him, because it was phenomenal, phenomenal service, and filled with life and vim and vigor, and with the Lord Jesus. So that's the structure. And of course, being a senior Catholic chaplain, very rarely would there be two Catholics. That would be the 89-16, 89-24 senior. Matter of fact, when Adam, like I said, left Little Rock, I became senior Catholic.
Yeah.
I actually went from this nomenclature to that nomenclature. No bigger pay grade, by the way. It's the same amount. Not even a step grade, but it's still captain. And I don't know, but I'm going blank here a little bit now, so bring me back.
Well, that's okay, because did you, at any point, did you ever go overseas?
I did, yes.
Was it about in this timeline, or did you stay
Yeah.
stateside for a
No.
long time?
I stayed 2 years, 89 to 90, 87, 89 at Little Rock. Then I PCS to Injur Lake Air Base, Turkey. And I was there for 2 years, before, during, and after storm.
And I'm assuming in Turkey, they had one chapel,
Exactly.
they had one Catholic service, one Protestant, one
It would be
Jewish,
one right after the
and
other.
one Muslim.
Yeah, no Muslim. No, there was no Muslim then. No, and I have to clarify on that, because as far as I know, I'm not even sure if now there are Muslims. I do know when I was active duty, they were working on, of all things, you know how we get hooked, we get into the little things.
Yes.
As being more important than what's
You mean like
real
politically correct things?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
So they were working on the insignia for a Muslim. Now, you might like to know, I was told this, it was very interesting, that in the early stages of the chaplaincy, it was my understanding that they were actually going to create a cross for Catholics and a cross for Protestants. So that if you were a Catholic in the field, especially in a combat zone, you could say, that's my priest, that's the minister.
Yes, yeah.
That's the rabbi, because the tablets, the 10 tablets. I shouldn't joke, I never forgot the Mel.
Oh, that was amazing.
Like he's coming now with it. And we have the 10 Commandments. That's one of the funniest lines. The history of the world, I think it was. So they have the tablets up here. Hilarious. So let me see if I get myself back here now.
Were you getting to the fact that they were going to try to get an
Yeah,
assembly
they were
for
going to.
Muslims?
Yeah, but then finally, one of the chief of chaplains, who it was, I don't know, in the earlier origins of chaplaincy, just put his foot down and said, "No, one cross for Christians. That's it." Which, it's universal. You see a cross, you know it's a chaplain that's of a Christian faith denomination. And but when I was active duty, they were toying with the idea, and I'm sorry that I don't know more, but as far as I know, they still have not entered into a Muslim active duty chaplain per se. I could be wrong on that. I will say this though, we always provided for a Muslim or any faith group. For example, when I was a VA chaplain years later, if somebody was a Muslim, I immediately contacted the local imam so that they could come in and take care of that person, especially if they were in a sick bed
Oh, yeah.
or in an ICU unit or something.
Sure.
Same with the Orthodox. I'd make sure the Orthodox minister would take care of that patient, that veteran. So I don't know. In other words, that service would be provided, that spiritual service, not just the religious service in itself,
Right.
the Mass, the Protestants' service, prayer service, whatever, but anything functional that was necessary for that faith group would be taken care of. It was interesting, too, when I was active duty and I was studying at Montgomery, Alabama, I'm not sure if it was 6 months or whatever, and we had faith groups, we had Protestant ministers, Catholic priests, and we went to chaplain school at Maxwell Air Force Base. And that was a wonderful setting. A bunch of wonderful people, ministers. It was a female and male, husband and wife, ministers.
Mhm.
One was Presbyterian, one was Episcopalian, and they were both active duty captains. I chuckled at that one. It was
Wow.
interesting. Yeah, husband and wife, and they were both active duty.
And, you know, I just have to ask, chaplaincy school, how do you take a religious person, you know, in the religious, and teach them, I mean, what are they gonna teach someone in a school?
I remember fondly the school was tremendous. And by the way, for what it's worth, I don't know if you know this, especially you combat personnel out there in the audience, chaplains do not have command authority. What rank were you? E5, E6?
E6.
Okay. Sir, I'm sorry, Sergeant. They would call you sir, Sergeant. If you and I had the old lifeboat, or we're in a combat zone, and you're in E6 and I'm a Captain Air Force chaplain, or Army chaplain, you outrank me. The only exceptions, Chief of Chaplains, which is obvious, 2 stars, and the Commandant of the school, full bird usually,
Yeah.
maybe a 1 star. They're the only exceptions. But bring me back again. 77.
School,
Oh, yeah.
chaplain school.
Yeah, they had, I'd never forget, there was a cigar chomping Father Jim Drukker, full bird. He was fantastic. And we had Baptists there, we had Methodists, there were 4 or 5 of us Catholic priests. And each day we would come in, as military settings are, they would have the big paper thing and pull the, here's our objective today, gentlemen,
sure,
and
sure.
chaplains.
The
and-
whiteboard
I
routine.
never forgot, it was tremendous. The objective that day, and they've been working on this for the week, bringing us up to this culmination, was to get to our respective rooms, to break us, the 30 of us, into 5, 6 rooms. And there was an envelope sitting on the table. And we were to come in and open that envelope. And what it was showing us, every one of us, and then each room had a commander, like Father Kasparovic, or there was a Williams, there was a Quaker, in the military as a captain from Philadelphia. Williams, Jack Williams, I think his name was. He was in a room and so forth. So the senior teachers, officers were there. And they were rating us, you know. Rating us here. And I remember we came in and we didn't know that. We just said the objective is to get to the envelopes, open them up, and follow the instructions. So we got to our room. Wow, what a web we wove. We went to the room, opened it up. Now, the whole outlaying of the situation was that we were supposed to build. One room were the contractors. One room owned the land. Envelope. One room was this and that. All did this. Now, that wasn't the objective. It was not the objective. So we pull out the envelope, right? Open it up, said, you are owner of so many thousands of acres. And the other rooms are gonna bing, bada boom. Okay. I never forgot. We got so possessed. Chaplains, I shouldn't betray this. I'm sorry, brother chaplains who were there, forgive me. But I think it's beautiful. I think it's a cute story, and I think you're gonna enjoy it. We opened it. We got so possessed, John. One of the chaplains, and you know, there's always a leader in a group. Okay. Believe it or not,
An alpha?
whatever, or a Catholic. Sorry, it's a funny show. So,
We'll let it pass.
or a Baptist, come on.
That's funny.
Or an evangelical, or a Lutheran. I can't keep going on. You know, there's 1,600 Protestant denominations in the Air Force.
Oh,
I
my
think 1,600, I
goodness.
think. And I
Oh.
remember one time somebody telling me, I couldn't believe it.
My, oh, my.
Remind me to tell you about Gordon Pip. Well, maybe I shouldn't. Nah, I can't tell you to you now. I'll tell you another story. Anyway, so bring me back again. Where was I here? Oh, so we're here with these. So one of the fellows took over. Believe it or not, with my big mouth, I did, and I was laid back someone. I can tend to be laid back in many circumstances. And I'm perusing this, and one of them got up, And he actually went up to the door, because it had a window in it. You imagine this? And they took paper and they scotch taped it up so nobody can see in. These are chaplains, for God's sake, chaplains. So it says, you will do, so the other room had, so it turned out, finishing this whole thing, was a week doing this. I think it was 4 or 5 days, Monday through. At the very end, they called us all back to the main room.
Auditorium or?
Yeah, the main room where, by the way, there was a chapel there for Catholics, a chapel. In this case, we had a couple different chapels for our own faith groups because of the nature of the chaplain school, etc. And I remember Gene taking the say, he didn't smoke it, he just chomped it.
Yeah.
A cigar chomping priest. Wonderful man. Oh, he was fantastic. He was Franciscan. And he said, gentlemen, he told our room, you failed miserably. Then they got us all there. And each room was told this. They say you were the captain in this room, and Tim and then Jerry, my good buddy, was the chaplain, head chaplain, and the teacher. And they said there was only one or two, I think it was one class that had successfully followed what should have been. Now, I also want to say there was a young minister, Protestant fella. I hate to admit that. Protestant, I mean that jokingly. Please don't take it the wrong way. Young fella, as we're doing this, we got so enraptured. Yeah, but no, we can get maybe 2 million. No, what are you talking 2 million? We can get about 50. My God, even I'm sitting back saying, my God, we couldn't get that. You can't bargain. That was great. But anyway, they're going. So one fellow, chaplains, do you think maybe Christ would want? Shut up! That's not that we're selling land here. Oh, he couldn't believe it. And I flashed back to this thing. I was beside myself. But I didn't think of it then. I said, wait a minute, maybe this young man, this new young ordained minister, because he looked very young,
sure,
was probably a captain 5 days out for the get-go. So anyway, that was it. We flunked because the essence of that class was for all of us to work together as what? Chaplains. That's chaplains. Not selling property, not buying property, not building buildings, not making millions of dollars. And Gene Kasparovic, who was the head, full bird, who was like the head instructor, said we failed miserably. I'm sorry if I betrayed my brother chaplains, but I thought it was so beautiful. And the course of instructions was so. We talked about ethics and morality. I talked about this when I was in seminary 4 years. But for example, the way a Catholic priest thinks, and we Catholics were pretty much of the same mindset. Father Mike Nichols, Ed Nichols, I'm trying to remember, 4 or 5 of us. I'm going off a straight tip. It's starting to happen a little here. It was just it was a lesson to be learned.
You were in the same mindset, like the Catholics were in the same.
Oh yeah. We had one thing where, for example, we called it the lifeboat ethics. Everybody's on a lifeboat. What do? Do you throw the person, et cetera, that type of thing? Well, the objective, the proposition was, suppose young Johnny. Oh, sorry, not to pick on you, John. Young Johnny. No, now I'm uncomfortable, but young Joey. I feel uncomfortable picking on an E6, for being a former E3, although I went to O3. Anyway, bring me back again. I'm joking too much. No, you can't bring me back. I got you lost. Oh no, the lifeboat ethic. So yeah, we were taught. So Johnny hates his colonel. He has an attaché case with a bomb in it. He's going to take that attaché case and he's going to go to the colonel's office, whom he hates and despises, and leave it there to blow up what we call the head shed. Okay. So Protestants, Catholics, I'm not sure if we had one rabbi at school. We priests have a different perspective than the Protestants. It was interesting how this parlayed. many of the products, as I recall, were of the mindset to inform. Let's say this young man came, Joey or Johnny, and told the chaplain he's going to do this.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I see where
What-
you're going with
What
this.
does that chaplain do?
Yeah.
How does he handle that?
And it's a confidentiality issue all of a
Exactly
sudden.
what it is, exactly, thank you, yes. So, many of the Protestants, as I recall, would have told the commander. We priests, most of us, from our teachings and our ethics and what we're taught at seminary, would be that sacrosanct. Now, if it's in the seal of confession, that cannot be betrayed in any way, shape, or form. So, the point I'm making is that even amongst ourselves.
Even if someone's gonna die, you can't.
Yeah, well, we don't know that per se. For example, I can only hypothesize, say somebody came by saying, I wish you would not do that. Let me go with you, or let me help you. In other words, ways of working around it.
Well, I think, and everybody always wants to know, what does the priest do when somebody comes in and says, I murdered someone?
Well, first of all, if it was sealed confession, I couldn't even discuss it at all. In other words, when a person goes to confession to a priest, it's as if he was not there. I mean, that's sacrosanct.
Okay.
That it can't. And each priest may have his own level of integrity on this, or level of or degree of how he would handle it. But fundamentally, we cannot betray that seal to the extent, that degree that I've never seen you before. To protect
Yeah.
the sanctity of that seal.
Mm-hmm.
So the hypotheses was, if you went to confession to you, we cannot betray that. And of course, the interesting thing, the dialogue there with the Protestants couldn't understand that. Now, I shouldn't just pick on Protestants, but I'm just saying the mainstream of the other chaplains couldn't understand that, because again, as you just said, Tim, from the background, that if lies are involved. But you know, I ponder this my own self. In the essence of that whole thing, where can someone go to, or to whom can someone go to, unless they can go unreservedly, and being sheltered and being protected in what they're sharing with a chaplain,
Mm-hmm.
to protect that relationship. And to me, it's pretty sacrosanct. It's pretty.
Well, and the very fact that they've gone, whether it's to a Protestant or a Catholic priest, to get this off their chest,
Exactly.
or to seek forgiveness, is the fact that, yes, I murdered someone, but it's not like,
I forgot that you brought that up. Yes,
you know,
exactly.
I'm going to switch the pitch just a little bit, because in school, I'm still in school, chaplain school.
Okay, yeah.
Do they ever talk about, you guys here in school, one of these days might have to go into combat zone, or we're in war all the time.
You know what?
And the chaplains go into with the guys. In other words, you're going to be out there with the guys. Do they ever train?
You know what's interesting? I don't think so. It's interesting because when you see some movies, I don't like to watch war movies, but that I remember and have seen some. Usually that's discussed. Like when you're an infantryman, you're being taught how to utilize a weapon.
Exactly.
I don't recall. I'm sure it had to be part of it, but as far as the essence of it, or the pondering on it, I don't recall.
I mean, did they tell you that you could anticipate being put into a situation like that?
I don't recall that. Believe it or not, no.
Wow. In other words, this
and
would
my
be...
brother chaplains. If you were there with me and it was there and I didn't, I'm sorry, but I don't recall, because again, I had my infantry background from from the
but I
'60s.
mean, as a chaplain, you could be assigned to Turkey.
Yes.
Okay, and at the time you were assigned to Turkey, was anything going on in that area of the world?
Well, yeah. When I was there, the Operation Provide Desert Shield and Provide Comfort had broken out. We were
So you were in a combat zone,
in the zone of
and
combat
yet
operation.
no training back stateside
No.
prepared you
No,
for...
actually and honestly, no.
Wow.
The only training would be kinda, in a way, would be that I had my infantry
Oh,
training.
of course.
Yeah, for myself.
Yeah, yeah.
But I hope I'm not remiss in this, that it was there, but I don't remember it. And I don't remember it to that degree that it would have been even mentioned.
Okay.
And if it was mentioned minimally, that I could recall.
So in Turkey, were you a chaplain that had a chaplain and did church services and so
Yes.
forth like that?
Yes.
Okay, at that same time, were there any chaplains traveling with the troops?
Yes, there were some, yes.
And differentiate for me the chaplain
Yeah,
that's in the
well,
chapel?
the difference there was that they were Army, because there was an Army captain chaplain that came in that was with the troops during the combat, his own combat, and he was in a different echelon than I was. I was at a basing, and then I went out, into different areas, but I fundamentally worked out of the chapel at Incirlik Air Base in Turkey.
And an example there would be servicemen could be under great stress, they could be going through.
Absolutely.
War, things. And so then you were there to help them get through.
Yeah, John, we actually went, I've heard numbers, I don't know how true, but we had a couple of Patriot Army that came in to protect the base. We did all the bombing raids in northern Iraq, into Mosul, Tikrit, and I went out in the flight line. I had top secret clearance, line badge and all, and I would go out to be with the troops to support them. As I say to people, because you're in this is killing. Remember I told you the Monsignors and that.
Yeah.
I would never bless the plane per se, but I would bless the troops. We had C-130s take off from the flight line, the jammers from Halbert,
sure.
from Florida, the jam. A-10s came in from Spangdahlem. F-111s came in from Lakenheath. God, it was it was interesting.
Was it a challenging job for you?
It was a challenging, wonderful job in the sense of helping my troops and loving them.
I've often thought about this. Counselors, not psychiatrists, let's not go that level, but like my counselor that I go to, sometimes we unload a lot of stuff.
Now you're talking as a disabled veteran.
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes we unload a lot of stuff to our counselor. And I've often wondered, I know you're supposed to be trained where don't take it personally, don't let it affect you.
Oh, forget about it.
But
It does.
I just, especially in a combat area.
I left the VA system because years later, after I got out of active duty, I went to work for the VA system. When I started, and I can't betray confession ever, so if there's anything said, know clearly it's nowhere near the realm of any confession or confessional matter with that seal of confession. But I started counseling people, and I'm I think I'm a very caring chaplain and priest and love people very much. And when I started hearing some of the stories, and I guess this was not confession, but there was one soldier, wow, that had come. He was Army, Vietnam, and he was ordered, and he lived with this till the day I met him, and we talked, counseled. He counseled me as well, by the way. It's a two-way. And I presume he's still living with it. I don't know. I'm sure he's seeing doctors on it. But he was up in a helicopter with, I think, 2 or 3 Kong they had captured. And there was a Lieutenant LC, as we say in the Army. We say LTC. You say LTC. We say LC. The Lieutenant Colonel told this sergeant, this Catholic boy, sergeant, to throw the Kong
Out of the helicopter.
Yeah, to throw him off the helicopter. Of course, at first he said, and he threw him. But the colonel didn't throw him. He threw him because he was ordered to. Well, needless to say, the next Kong told you his mother's birth date and
Oh yes,
name it.
yeah.
It was clear he was next. But this man had lived this. I couldn't sleep for a long time, and And right after that, I pretty much left full-time VA chaplaincy.
And you can't be trained for that. No school could prepare you
No.
to try to, because, and so I guess my point is you couldn't help but absorb. You couldn't help but absorb this.
You'd have to be a robot, not to.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no way.
And so I'm assuming chaplains see a lot of men and women. So I don't think anybody ever thinks about chaplains as having a hard, stressful life, you know. And I shared with you my Vietnam combat experience, and chaplains were few and far between.
Wow.
It were out, you know, I was out in the field most of the time. But something that I did notice is when we did get a chaplain, he always seemed to be, he wanted to be there. Number one, it wasn't like the minute he got off the helicopter, he was looking.
If I may interrupt you, but there's only this. There's no doubt on my mind that a priest, I don't know about ministers and so, but I'm almost sure it'd be the same, that you have to have that fiber to be able to accept it, like the Lutheran minister. I wish he's a wonderful young man to embrace this kind of life of understanding, of counseling.
Sure.
It's a different world. To try to lift someone,
Yeah.
to love them, to forgive them. God forgives, of course,
Yeah.
through the sacraments and so forth. So it's, and another thought, that during Persian Gulf, most people don't know, but many of the Kurds were Chaldean Catholics.
That's right. You're
Many
right.
of them.
Yeah.
So in a way, many of them were our enemy. And they had to be embraced and taken care of as well.
You know, for someone watching this who doesn't know, when I was a kid, we'd go to the toy section and we saw G.I. Joe. You didn't ever see G.I. Chaplain. You never saw, a figure. And then the only chaplains we knew, I knew Chaplain Charlie from Full Metal Jacket. Because that's, I remember the line, Chaplain Charlie's going to do his church.
Right.
And then there's one chaplain that has always stuck out to me forever, because I was with him once a week my entire childhood. And that was Father Mulcahy.
Oh yeah, I was going to say MASH.
And that was
Isn't
it.
that an interesting
I mean,
thought?
I never even thought, I've never met another chaplain. Just thinking about the perspective of how I think all the different perspectives of people and what they see. I heard the story of a soldier that captured, it'd be a weird miracle that the story you told about the Viet Cong falling out of the helicopter,
Throw him out.
because in one of the interviews, a soldier actually captured like 2 or 3 Viet Cong, and they said, okay, we'll take them back to base for you. And then they put them in the air and flew them away, and then the guys looked over, and as the thing's flying away, they're tossing them out of the chopper.
And that was well, no, that was my story. That was my unit.
Yeah, well,
and
I
now,
don't want to say anything, of course.
No, but the thing is if you can, and Jerry will attest to this, if you can believe this, instead of all of us being horrified and saying, that wasn't right, that's not good,
That's
you know
wrong.
what somebody said? Oh, it looks like he must have slipped on some 90 weight.
Yeah.
In other words, he slipped on some transmission fluid up there. So we didn't, at that point in our lives, we didn't even care.
Now, what's interesting to me, and I don't want to stir you up, please don't take it this way, and this is really messing with me. I need you to help me understand this, guys. What's the difference? He was the enemy. What's the difference of a soldier taking an M16 and shooting him, or throwing him off of a helicopter?
I would say
what is the difference? To me, it's war. Now, the only problem is, and you said the Geneva Convention earlier, in war, it's one thing to be engaging your enemy.
Sure.
It's another thing to take a guy and just throw him out. So I don't know how to reconcile that of what is the, how do we look at it and go, well, you're right, this was wrong, or, you know, how do we deal with that? Help me reconcile.
I think you'd have to ask John from his perspective, and you're asking me from my perspective, but the basic the truth of the matter simply is we just don't kill somebody for the sake of killing, even an enemy.
Yeah.
You don't just kill somebody. If I have an M16 in my hand and I'm engaging an enemy,
Yeah.
I'm shooting to defend a cause. And by the way, in our Catholic faith, we're taught that we have the right to protect ourselves against an unjust aggressor. It's called the
Yes.
principle of double effect. We can never directly intend an evil, but we can protect ourselves. The only exception, even according to Bishop Sheen, the wonderful Archbishop
I loved
Sheen,
him.
was in nuclear war. That because too many innocents
Yeah.
were
Oh,
just
my
killed
goodness,
for the
yes.
sake of dropping.
Dad, what's your perspective on what we were talking about? Because Father Jim mentioned about, you know.
Yeah, because you said-
What do you think about that?
Well, personally,
Were you one of the ones? Not that of you, but were you one of the ones that said that, or was it some of your
no,
comrades?
no.
Not that I'm saying you
some
did.
other guy did.
Okay, yeah.
But I related to that because it just showed we laughed. I mean, I must have slipped on some transmission fluid, right?
And again, you were young. Keep that in mind too.
and we were in the
And you're engaged in
we were
combat.
in the
You know you
hobo
have an
woods.
enemy going to kill you.
We were in the hobo woods. This was a stronghold of NBA. We were out there in the middle of it, and our mission is to basically walk around in there until you get hit.
And as Jerry shared with me earlier, my good friend Jerry Tempesta, that you were in an open fire area.
But what do you think about the let's go back to that question because you didn't answer.
Well, personally, for me, if we caught a prisoner, I never saw any of us ever shoot a prisoner, ever. Now, however, when they would send in an ARVN intelligence officer to interrogate the guy, this man was a brutal, really brutal person. They would take their handgun, put it in their mouth, and they're yelling at him at all times. This is the man that put that guy on the helicopter, got on the helicopter himself, and the last thing he told us is, we're gonna take this guy back to Cu-Chi and take him to the intelligence and interrogate the guy. So as the helicopter, we all notice something. Helicopters, when they take off, go like this, and then they go like that, and they take off.
Like a hovering.
And so this guy just goes, and he just starts fading away from us, and he's up there about 500 feet. And I said, something's not right. He should have been.
I see, did something different out of the
And then
usual.
all of a sudden, this guy comes bailing out of there. And the Vietnamese interrogator shoved him out. Now, I guess because the mentality of being in combat, they say the fog of war, but it's even different than that. If you've seen so many horrible things, that's nothing. And the problem is you've seen your men torn up, and legs gone, dead, your best friend gets killed. So there's something at play here as far as the mentality of combat veterans. And I've told this to people 100 times. There's nobody that experiences combat like a combat vet. In other words, 90% of the people in Vietnam supported the 10% of the combat vets that were out in the field. And so everybody has a different point of view and experience. I can guarantee you the guys in the rear did not have the same experience as the 10% of us that were out front. And but to answer Tim's question, if somebody would have shot that prisoner, murder. That would have been murder. Because you don't kill.
Well, number one, he wasn't able to defend himself.
No, but I mean,
think
you just
that's
don't kill human beings.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Well, that's our moral code. I think I was at Little Rock. A friend of mine from here, from Philly, Joe, Sergeant Joe, I was in the guard with him for some years. His daddy died. So I came back for the funeral. Flew back special. I got some permissive TDY and came back and buried his daddy. And we got talking about combat because Joe was in Vietnam. He was Air Force, and he was in combat zone, sort of combat operation. And he said to me one day something very impactful that impacted on me years later, from that moment on, was that he said, you know, we Americans, I'm not sure the exact words he said, but it's very poignant. He said, we're very compassionate. Basically, our fundamental fiber is we're caring, compassionate, decent people. Because he said there were times when the children would come up to their Jeep, and you know what I'm leading up to,
I know.
maybe, and they would throw things, and the troops, the sergeants or privates or whatever, airmen, whatever, would give them candy. Something.
Sure.
And then one time he said, Father, I never forgot it. It stayed with me, and it changed me. He said, one day one of the children went up. It was on our compound. And they went up, and my friends that I was serving with, were in the Jeep, 3 or 4 or 5 of them. And he said the child threw a hand grenade in and killed everybody. Killed everybody. He said that changed his whole life. The fiber of his soul, of his very being, the essence of what he was. It tore him apart.
Sure it did.
And when I heard it, it tore me apart. So that's throwing the person out of the airplane.
And then there's another
Exactly.
issue. Jerry and I, when we were serving, we were with the enemy. We were with the enemy like this, and that's one issue. We kill them, they kill us, and that happened. How about the B-52 pilot
Oh, yeah.
who goes over
Help us.
and drops ordnance and kills God only how many
Yes.
women, children? I mean, did he see himself? He was given orders. He had a flight plan. He was just doing what he was told.
Who was given a mission?
But he didn't see anybody.
Yeah.
He did. You know, Jerry and I saw.
Yeah, you were at the heart of it.
So that's a different thing. Now I'm going to change the subject a little bit, because now you're a chaplain in Turkey, and you're dealing with people that are in combat. As a young Catholic boy, I went through Catholic school. I learned, you know, the nuns did a good job on me because, oh, buddy, but no.
Sisters of St.
I
Joseph.
mean, and I shared,
I'm sorry, sisters.
and I shared with
Oh,
you.
by the way, we went to dinner last night to the pub, a very big group. The first time I went there with some friends of mine. Antonio he was a shooter, a sniper, and there was a nun there with 2 people. I'm very outgoing, flamboyant. Hi, what's your name? I became very famous. Where are you from? They did an article of me once in the Air Force Times or whatever. And if I could tell you a good story, I will tell you one on that. Remind me. But let me go back. So Sister Helen was there, and I said, Sister, what order are you? It was just husband and wife taking the nun to dinner. She was in the habit looked familiar, the clothing. She said, Sister of St. Joseph. I went, Sister. She said, enough out of you, Father. I said, that's Sister
fine.
Marie Christie, Sister John.
Oh yeah. So anyway, my point is you're being. I used to say I was being taught. Later, I called it something else, but about the sacraments.
Right. Very
about
good.
Communion.
How many? I'm sorry.
About when I was an altar boy.
Okay.
Nobody touched the chalice.
Yes.
No, I mean,
Sacrosanct.
and we were
The priest.
We were almost convinced that if you accidentally touched the monstrance, a finger would fall off, or it would be like you would die.
Are you serious?
Oh,
see.
buddy, no, buddy,
Okay, you're safe.
I'm telling you.
Oh,
And so
brother.
this is inculcated in your thinking. And you go to confession, and you learn this, First Communion, and all this stuff. And then now I'm a combat veteran in the middle of hell, and they've told us that we're going to be going in to a battle that they know is going to be horrible, and that a lot of guys aren't going to be coming back. So that's before we even get started. And all of a sudden, here comes a chaplain. Helicopter comes in,
How wonderful.
and a chaplain.
How wonderful.
And he comes out there, and of course, you know, somebody would say, hey, chaplain's going to be setting up over there. Anybody
Right.
that wants to see the chaplain.
Sure, right.
And then somebody yell, hey, somebody get a couple of ammo boxes over there so he can
Set up for the mass, whatever.
whatever.
Service.
And so when you know that in your life, if you have any faith left at all, that, and they're telling you that this might be it,
Yeah.
and there's gonna be a chaplain there, you don't know, they just said chaplain, they didn't say priest, they didn't say rabbi, they didn't say anything. And you go, and some guys were so hardened, they wouldn't go. But guys like me that had been brought up in that realm, I said, I need all the help I can get, okay?
Thank God.
So I went, and this chaplain started in, and he goes, okay, boys, he says, I know, and you know why I'm here. He says, you boys are gonna, tomorrow, you boys are gonna be going into some real bad stuff. And he says, I'm here because I just want to give you the opportunity. I want you to know that I am here to help you.
Ministry of presence.
Help you, okay? If any of you just need to talk about anything. And he goes, how many Catholic boys do I have here? And of course, a lot of guys raise their hands. Ray Bourgeois and I, my best friend in Vietnam, his godfather.
Oh, wonderful.
And so Ray says, this is a waste of time. And I go, I'm not so sure about that. I said, let's just go over and see what he has to say. And then he goes, how many Protestants? And of course, a ton of guys did. Do we have any Jewish boys here? A couple of guys raised their hands, right? And he goes, okay, we're gonna start with the Catholic boys. I'm gonna do a brief mass, and then I'm gonna hand out communion. So if, when I get to the communion part, just line up and I'll give you the communion. And then the Protestant kids, and he did a
Service.
prayer service,
Right.
and then the rabbi, and I stayed for all of them. I mean, once this guy
Sure,
got
why not?
started, and because you never know, maybe the Jews were right, or no, I'm just kidding.
No, whatever.
But
I understand.
and so all of a sudden, you know what I realized? He wasn't a priest.
Mm.
He had hosts.
Yeah.
He had the body of Christ, and in my altar boy training, anybody but a priest touched that host. How come he still had all his fingers? And I later found out that in that situation, if Father Jim was out there, he would be representing Christ, God, to all of us. In other words, it was non-denominational at that point. And so I thought, well, later on in life, I thought, how was it that he got the hosts? And I found out that these chaplains worked very closely together, and there wasn't enough of them to go around, obviously. And so the priests would say, okay, Pastor Jim, here's the hosts, and this is what you say for our guys. And then the Protestant minister would tell the priest, okay, now this is what is involved in our service, and so forth. So, in other words, they were there for all of us. And it didn't, denomination, but it was very important for a Catholic kid to get communion, obviously. And so it's almost like they didn't go by all the rules, the ecumenical whatever, and now we were really down to business. And that's what I was getting to you before. When chaplains are in dealing with combat vets, either in the field or after the field, this is, what? It's fine if you're a Catholic and I'm a priest, but if you're not a Catholic, I still can be your source for what you need, or what, and I'd like your thinking on that.
Well, where were you? I'm curious. I'm curious of where the combat zone you were in. I'd like the audience to know. Where were you at that time? Did you go into a direct combat fight?
Definitely.
If I may ask, if I'm not intruding and asking you that?
That's when we were working the Hobo Woods and the Iron Triangle. And this was a very strong, this was like a regimental size NVA was in there, and they knew it. And what I've always thought before is, why didn't they B-52 that instead of sending us in there? But that's another story. But yeah, we knew where we were at, and we knew what we were going to be doing, and we did go. And you know what? We lost some guys, and a lot of guys got wounded, and so forth. But, yeah, I've always thought how interesting that the Army was sensitive enough. I mean, the Army intelligence kind of knew we were going to get our asses handed to us here, but they sent the chaplain out.
Well, you've asked a question. I have to answer it honestly. And what I mean by that, to not hurt anybody, to offend anybody spiritually, sacramentally.
I'm offended.
Okay, that's good. I got one going here. I was stationed. I won't tell you where as a VA chaplain. I'm going to give you another story. I'll come back to this. And there was a rabbi, and I knew nothing about this. Nice fella. He was a chaplain. He was a VA chaplain, like a rabbi. VA chaplain, Jewish, rabbi. VA chaplain, Catholic. VA chaplain, 3 or 4 Protestants. Usually a lot of Protestants, you know, they like that kind of work, and it's a good work for them. And it's a great life, like in the military. But anyway, one of my Catholics came to me. Now this is not, I'm not with them every day, because I'm a chaplain who works there, go back to my rectory at night, to Hermitage, VA, go back to Cleveland, VA, et cetera, et cetera. And he says, you know, Father, it was so nice, you weren't here yesterday, but I got to see Rabbi Schwartz. I'm using a fake name.
Sure, sure.
And you know, he heard my confession. I said, oh. Now, so he set the record straight, come to your situation, or a situation similar. No one can confect or administer sacraments from a Catholic perspective except a Catholic priest, per se. A Catholic priest can minister as a chaplain to anybody of any faith group, Jewish, whatever, with respect to that faith group and the dignity and rights, privileges,
Sure.
sacrifices of that faith group. So if I were ministering to a rabbi, to a Jewish person, I would try to be as Jewish as I can.
Absolutely.
And be understanding and loving and do the best I can. But that rabbi, I never reported this simply because I had a heart-to-heart with him later and shared with him, but he was defensive, go back to the VA again, in saying that I said, Chaplain, look, with the deepest of respect, you were out of place, because it's not your place. It's one thing to talk with them, counsel them,
Right.
and say, I hope you feel better, and please know it was a blessing for me to have shared with you spiritually, but to say that you heard his confession, that's wrong. Because not only is it wrong, because he thinks it's right, that makes it even more wrong. Just wrong. After the talk, I just let it go, and eventually I left, and the dilemma is, will he continue to do it with someone? So I would take the exception to your situation, the exception, because you are in direct combat, and things happen. And there's things with a wink and a nod.
Yeah.
And I believe in my heart of hearts that chaplain knew very well that he was not giving the Holy Eucharist from our understanding. Take, eat, this is, take, drink.
I couldn't even address that. I have no idea.
Because
all I knew is we were, at the end of the day, we were so thankful that he came.
Because I even had a situation with the head doctor at a hospital, I won't say which one, a VA hospital, that we had our meeting, and the head of the pharmacy, I as the chaplain was hospice unit, and the head doctor, the head intern, and this doctor was very famous for being a hospice doctor, and I shared with the group that there was someone there that needed Eucharist, and I was able to afford and help him with the blessings of Holy Eucharist. And that doctor started remonstrating with me by saying, well, you should give communion to anybody. I said, Doctor, no, you're off base. I can only give Holy Communion to those who believe in Holy Communion as we believe. It's a matter of integrity and the respect for that soul. And he took it to the degree of calling headquarters. And of course he was remonstrated. And he was a very famous doctor, a very powerful doctor.
You want to explain what that means? Remonstrated?
He was hollered at.
Oh,
He was,
no,
he was taken to task.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, yeah, he was taken to task saying, Father was right and correct. Not so much I want to be right,
Right.
but because I'm a caring fella and I love people. And it was a locked horns type thing. And I went to deep. I said, Doctor, you're a phenomenal doctor, but apparently in this realm, well, you want to take care of everybody, but it's not just a ramp and do this, do that, and you can do this, and it's not the way it is, and it's incorrect. And you must understand that it's a matter of respect of that faith, of that particular, because I know you're not a Catholic, and he admitted that. He said, I'm a Protestant, we just give giving anybody. Whatever, so let that be as it is. And that worked its way out. But some can be of that mindset. And again, in a combat setting, things take place differently. For example, in combat, the priest, this is the only exception that I know of in canon law, theological and in canon law, that in a combat setting, you are able to give general absolution. That's the only time in a setting there, because you do not know if that soul is going to go into combat and go back to the Lord or not.
Yep.
Now, part of that injunction is that I now give you absolution, bow your heads, and so forth.
Say 3 Hail Marys.
Well, okay. In your case, John, more.
No, it would be many. No, it would
Just
be many
busted.
rosaries.
Just
Let me
busted.
tell you.
Just bust you. But, let's see if I can- so I'm trying to get myself back again here. So that could be given, but with the injunction that God willing you come out alive and well, you then should go see a father confessor.
Sure.
And especially in serious sin.
Sure.
In what we call mortal sin. Venial sin, you can say a serious act of contrition and say the prayers that maybe the priest might give you in this general absolution
Sure.
setting. But
And
that's the only exception.
This is where the lines get very blurry for me, because, and I wonder about the military and what they're, how, you know, like when you talked about, you know, the priest came, and then when Dad had a big issue with Ray at the thing, because the guy was taking the sacrament, and Dad, you know, instead of taking it, Dad just stuck his tongue out.
Right,
And,
right, which is proper, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just being funny, but the
Now you got ready for this. In the Eastern Rite, we give Holy Communion from a spoon, the body and blood, a little
Yeah.
parcel, consecrated host, with the blood of Christ and the
I
spoon.
didn't know that.
And you know, and the chaplaincy lines between this is a very blurry matter, because the denominations, you know, when you're in a combat zone, like you said, you know, that guy was so relieved that he got to confess to somebody, and it troubled you, and you felt like integrity was, you know.
Well, you mean in the VA now?
Yeah,
We're talking the VA
yeah,
system.
different
Okay,
situation,
yeah.
but
with the
but,
rabbi.
You know, because the Bible says confess your sins one to another, and so then again, it's a denominational line there that's very hard. So that doctor, and you know, you and the doctor disagreed because he was asking you to take your very personal, very sincere, you know.
But it's not only my belief, Tim, it's the belief of my church.
No, yes, that's what I was saying. Not your,
right.
yeah, the
Yeah.
belief. And how could you be disloyal to those beliefs? And I get that. And that's why it's so, you know, and this is another thing that's interesting, that I'm not sure if you've heard this, and because we were just with the Marine, and he was talking to us, and he didn't ever bring up chaplains to the picture.
How about that?
He said when we were going on a big battle, they brought the grills out to the beach. They brought the steaks and the hamburgers and the hot dogs out, and we went and swam in the river. You know, they were eating steak
And whenever
before their
they
battle.
did that, they knew what was coming.
You know, they were having steak dinner.
That was a prelude.
Your
Prelude to the Last Supper.
But I'm just saying, they were doing steak dinners for them, and all these guys are getting the priest into their. You know, it's just interesting between the Army and the Marines.
I would have preferred John's situation, trust me. If
know.
I were not a priest and a priest, trust me.
But it's just interesting how, you know, to have a chaplain come into a camp or to an opportunity, and to be, you know. Now, I was going to ask a different question.
By the way, can I share? I'm sure your audience knows this, but this is an off person an off-camera person that is a minister, an ordained minister, right? And so you're bringing this forward into this dialogue. It's great.
No comments at this time.
Okay. No, but I mean it's a voice.
Yeah.
Off camera.
Sure.
Yeah.
That is
sure.
of a
Yeah.
different denomination.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But this is one thing I think we should talk about that's very important. you weren't just there for combat. You were there, I mean, there's other things in the pie of the military service, like morality. You know, how did you deal with soldiers in perversion? How did you deal with, soldiers in alcoholism? How did you deal with soldiers in drug abuse? I mean, see, because sometimes I think we get so tunnel vision, like, oh yeah, let's talk all about combat.
Well,
but you were there as a chaplain, and you got to see lots of pieces of that pie of the things I just mentioned. Guys,
I want to share with you, Tim, how
Yeah.
difficult it is being a priest, being a minister, being a chaplain.
Yeah.
There was a person, I won't even say what base.
Mhm.
He was a drinker. He had worked his way from enlisted. I wish I could share more for the whole essence of it, but interesting. And I bailed him out more than once, being a friend, being a Catholic friend, being his priest.
Literally putting bail down?
No.
Oh.
I bailed him out,
Digging him out, yeah.
Okay.
figuratively speaking, in the
Okay.
sense of talking to the commander.
Gotcha.
And he was a wonderful man. But he had gotten into trouble a few times, drinking. And I helped save his career. Okay, I shouldn't say me, don't get me wrong. What I meant was his career was saved through the essence of a chaplaincy, someone caring. Now, years later, it's interesting. I was talking with him totally years later, and I thought he loved me, platonically, obviously. And he said, Father, I'm really upset at you because, when you didn't, I said, wait, I said, John, are you serious? I said, you don't even know the truth of the essence of this whole thing you're saying. You're taking a shot at a fella that built your ass.
Mhm.
Pardon my French, as
Mhm.
my brother said, I didn't know I was speaking French all these years. Sorry. Anyway, yeah, I bailed your ass out more than once. And you're coming. What happened was there was a young lady. I can't say the base, but at a base I was at for 2 years. And it was, anyway, she wasn't going to Mass. She wanted me to baptize her baby. Now, I know a lot of Protestant ministers might think differently, and I would baptize any baby any day of the week with love and blessings and care. And I said to her simply, Mary, let's say, will you please come to Mass? Oh, I don't believe in that. I said, you don't believe in it? I said, well, come at least receive communion. Go to get the communion. I don't believe in that either. I said, then why have your child baptized? If you don't, well, because my mother's coming in from Italy,
Oh, go.
and I would like my mother to be there. Now, I'm going to tell you the truth what happened. No one knows this. I'm telling it to the audience now because I think it's a good lesson. And it's called love. So, she said, I said, how can you ask me to do something that is so interiorly important spiritually, sacramentally? There's an integrity here, and you don't even believe it. You don't care. You know what I did? I went downtown to the priest downtown. I said, Father Vincenzo, do me a favor. Don't let her know. I want you to baptize her baby. Her family's coming in from Italy. Make a big shindig for her. Love her, and maybe through your love, maybe I'm not touching her.
Yeah.
By the way, she never went to Mass after that either. He told me that later. All right. It was a confessional matter, so I'm not betraying that. And I said, let the family come in, baptize the child for the sake of the child, and let's hope we can bring that child into the church, to the faith, to the sacraments. And he said, okay. Now, Michael, well, I should have said his name. This person says to me, I said, oh, if you only know. And then I told him, I said, are you aware that she did nothing but make a mockery? She didn't believe in Eucharist. She didn't believe in the Catholic faith. She didn't believe in the church. She didn't believe in anything. All she cared was that her mommy and daddy would come in and see this big show.
Sure.
And I said, you know what I did, Michael? I told him to go downtown. I told the priest to call him as if I'm not even involved. Let me be the bad guy in this. And we took care of it. He said, oh. I said, be careful how quick something is said. They're the things, I don't know about Protestant ministers, that many times priests, and I'm sure ministers go through. and trying to love people and take care of them.
Oh, yeah.
It's difficult. I can remember in my priesthood back in the States when I was a pastor, people coming in and cursing me because I moved the chandelier that was all rusty. And I said, the bishop told me to put a new chandelier in. I can't spell chandelier, let alone do it. I said, then the head priest told me to do it. I said, why are you cursing me? I said, I'm from Kensington, K&A, Philadelphia. I knew that word when I was 2, or coming out of my mother's womb, probably. I'm from Philadelphia. I grew up in the top section of Philly. But I said, you don't do that. I said, what, are you kidding me? I'm a priest. This is my first parish. You're out of your mind. They were cursing me, going crazy.
But with the military, did you see that piece of the pie? Did you deal with a lot of, helping, kind of keeping guys steered in the right direction if they would get messed up with drugs or alcohol or thoughts of suicide or perversion or letters from home or any of that? Did you?
Absolutely.
PT,
All of that. All of that is all of the above and more. Yes.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, my first month, I'm active duty at Little Rock Air Force Base prior to going overseas. And the first sergeant calls me. He said, Father, I got a Catholic boy here. We caught him in the shower with a rope around his neck.
Oh.
I said, oh my God. I said, well, I said, look, I'm coming right over. So I went right over. Sat him down, we talked. I shared this with you, John, earlier, off camera. And it turned out he had some problems. I convinced him to go see the psychologist on base, who was one of our Catholic fellows. And the interesting thing, and I don't know if it's still the way it is, and maybe it's wrong to say it to be politically incorrect or correct, that when he went in, and I actually got in the car with him, when I got into my office, I drove to the psychologist's office, because he asked me to be with him.
Yeah.
I stayed in the session. I asked the psychologist, do I have your, he said, absolutely, you have my permission to be here with him, and so forth. And he changed his whole life. He got back on the right path because he knew someone cared, and his whole life changed, and he became a good soldier. But I couldn't believe it. My first month, the boy was caught with the rope around his neck. My first month of active duty as an active duty Catholic priest chaplain. And what I wanted to mention was he had to sign a waiver going to see the psychologist, not like the VA. I know, right? Because I've counseled people, etc. That his commanding officer and or first sergeant or those in the need to know would have the right to know about his state.
Oh, yeah, I know where you're going
I
with
said,
this.
no.
Yeah.
I said, the psychologist was Ron. He said, Father, that's the rules. That's the rule in the military. I said, you're kidding me. That's sacrosanct. You can't, but he had to sign it. But luckily, by being with him, comforting him, and staying there, that eventually I said to him, Joey, I'd like you to be alone with, all right, Father. And then from that moment on, he was being counseled by the psychologist, and we got him back to a good stead in life. Yeah.
So, Father, kind of getting round, winding up our interview today, it's, how long have you been in the priesthood?
God, I can't believe it. 41 years this year, December 3rd, 1978, so it'll be 41 years this year.
And how long of that time have you been in chaplaincy?
Military chaplaincy? Chaplaincy, other than my other military infantry, 12 years active. Yeah.
Okay. In those 12 years, you dealt with, maybe not Vietnam vets actively, but you dealt with Gulf War and those guys. And that was a group of people, and they had their situations. Later, though, when you came home, you started seeing Vietnam vets.
Yes.
And
veterans of Second World War and everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you see any distinction or any difference between combat vets in the desert, Vietnam vets, or World War II vets? I mean,
Right.
just in your...
It's an extremely interesting question from a perspective of chaplaincy. First of all, the stress would be similar in the sense of the havoc and the hell. You know, whether you're Second World War and you were killing people, or then putting it in their terms, or being shot at, or having your buddy killed, whether in the desert, Persian Gulf, whether in the jungles of Vietnam. So I would say in that sense, it's extremely similar. And I don't know how I would characterize, I can't say the word.
Characterize.
Thank you. I'm a former disc jockey. On the 185, 90. Anyway, I lost that one. Characterize. Oh, I got it. No, it's a very profound question. I would say, I think, and this is beyond golf now, because I also counseled further Gulf War, South.
Afghanistan, Iraq.
Exactly, including my own nephew, who came back from Afghanistan as an E5, buck sergeant, a grunt, to forget about it, grunt, and he contracted multiple sclerosis while active duty. And the first, by the way, as a note, first time ever I saw the VA working intimately with an active duty situation, and apparently they're doing that now, which is wonderful and amazing. And he filtered out, I won't say percentages because it's his life and his business, but he did contract, and they accepted it. They told him, they came forward, and they mustered him out of active duty because he didn't want to leave. He did not want to leave. He loved the Army, infantry. He was infantry and defensive artillery in Afghanistan. He actually had to go through an operation by being sent back, I think it was to Fallujah, to have a hernia operated, and then he contracted this MS. And again, that's another side note, but they really took care of him. I gave a good percentage as he got out of active duty.
Good.
Sadly, he's lost his peripheral vision, and at 25 he can't drive. So all of this through having served our country at 25 years of age. So I would say, it's kind of like painting a picture, they're more in need or more better, that they were in heavier combat and they had more destruction. No. But I would think that the young men and women today are witnessing a different kind of combat, a different kind of PTSD. And as far as I know, there are a lot more, some of the research I've done, suicides of those coming out now than prior wars, combat, etc. And I think maybe it might be a meter of the fiber of the young men and women of today. I don't think they're, I don't know how I'm going to put it, I don't think they're made as strong. They seem to be, it's not that they're weak, it's a different mindset. I'm struggling with this, but I believe that they are suffering more in different ways than Vietnam, Korea, Second World War. Maybe it's because that combat was clear. 105s, 155s, M16s, M60s. Here you're in a firefight, in a desert. You can't even hide, kind of. So I think it's a little more tormenting, a little bit more destructive for the soldiers of today in my travels, because as I say, I did counsel beyond Persian Gulf and Vietnam and Korea and Second World War.
Now, you directly worked for the VA.
I did, yes.
Okay, so if a guy is in the VA for PTSD, for instance,
Right.
probably pretty bad.
Oh, sure, yes.
Okay.
And that's why I made the comment before. I mean, you got to go through, I was going to say hell. You got to go through hell to get a percentage.
Oh, yeah.
And because you have to prove.
Yeah.
And rightly so. But when they mustered him out, I was heavily stunned. I said, wow.
Yeah.
He got this percentage, and they really worked with
Yeah.
him, which is a good sign of what the VA is doing now.
Yeah.
And now they have this choice program. So us veterans are service connected, can actually see a doctor off basis,
Sure.
I say, off hospital, and be taken care of, and the VA takes care of us.
Sure.
It's wonderful.
And I'm assuming, and I know this is true, you've had to do a lot of research on PTSD yourself. I mean, you've had to learn and from a psychological program or perspective. And so, as you see a real bad case of PTSD, okay, and there's people out here that, guys out here that are gonna be watching with this, that still suffer. Vietnam vets, I have many of my comrades that still have severe PTSD that sometimes leads to a suicidal end. Just as in closing, would you please give your best advice, your best prayer, if you will, for these men? This might be the only time, Father Jim, that they actually hear from someone that has been intimately involved with the spiritual side of PTSD. Would you do that for me?
It's a very tall order to place me within that realm, but I would say that you must come to God, the Creator. Chaplains are interdenominational. Certainly we're Catholic, certainly we're Jewish, certainly we're Protestant, etc. But every chaplain cares about you. I can't tell you how many, and I know you know this, John, will say, Father, I don't deserve it. Yes, you do deserve it. And it's not you earned it, it's you were there. For God's sake, you were there. And if you need help, come to the VA. Come to a chaplain. Find out if you're afraid to encounter that per se. Find out the chaplain. If you're Protestant, his name. Find out what church he's at. He's at St. Mary's, or he's at Baptist church down at 5th and Main, Cincinnati, whatever. And see him there and work your way in. And then get the help that you need. It is there at the VA. I don't know what it was like 20 years ago. I wasn't there 20 years ago. I don't know what it was like. Yes, at 15 to 20, but before, I don't know. But I do know the chaplaincy cares. I do know people care. And I do know there's those that don't care. You'll go and you'll be putting a piece of paper, you'll be down here instead of up here. But get to the VA. You can get the help you need, especially if it's something you're dealing with and you can't deal with it. And again, the idea I just had, find the minister, nose around, or go see your priest, go see your minister, and maybe that priest, that minister will get you into the VA. Don't worry about percentages and not, just simply get there to be helped. I worked with a psychiatrist, psychologist clinical from Egypt at one VA, Dr. Bishai. He knew Martin Luther King well, personally, but a side note. But he wrote paper and shared them with me on PTSD. He was an expert on post-traumatic stress disorder. And I know you're thinking, well, maybe I don't have it. Maybe if you're thinking period about it, see a chaplain. Let him lead you to a doctor that can help you spiritually, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I pray for you every day. I pray for me. And I never realized the military family that I have. My oldest brother is buried in England, gave his life, is buried at Mattingly, Cambridge Cemetery. My next older brother just died a few years ago, submarine, Second World War. My brother Louis, my baby brother, who passed away about 10 years ago, I buried him. He was Army Security Agency. His son was Navy, Guy. His children, the one girl just came back from Lakenheath. I was angry at her because she didn't tell me she was at Lakenheath. That's where my brother's buried. So she was our Air Force. Her twin sister is Navy. Caitlin, Amanda, their brother Andrew is the one that just came back from Afghanistan. So please let God lead you to be helped. And you're in my prayers. And please pray for me. I'm a service-connected vet like you.
Father, in closing, would you just offer up a prayer for all veterans? any veteran that is watching this, let's just encompass all of them.
Now, as you know, being a priest, I want to bless myself. Not that I won't do it, but I want to pray pluralistically. And I ask, Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for this media, the media of television, of video, of audio, that you would bless all of the soldiers, not only of our own country, but of good, righteous countries that care for values, democracy, and freedom and love of neighbor. Bless my soldiers. Bless the soldiers in this audience. Lift and heal them. Those dealing with anything serious, Lord, lift them. Let them go into the inner recesses of their hearts and souls and gain the help that you can offer them, not just spiritually, but physically, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally as well. As blessings on John and Tim on this ministry, of this video ministry, that is now an historical document, as blessings on my best buddy, Jerry Tempesta, and all their soldiers, Antonia, my brothers that I serve with, and sisters, and blessings on our country and our president and our military forces. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father Jim. This has been, I got to tell you, this interview has been so personal for you and for me that you've shared some stuff that I'm sure you've never shared with anybody else. And for that, and for the folks that are watching this, God bless you real good.
I love you, John.
Okay.
And I love you all. And God bless you, Tim.
Thank you.